On Giles, every Thursday at 7:30 p.m. on OTB Sports Radio, live 24/7 on the Go Loud app.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
It's Friday morning at 7:30. Very good morning to you. Hope all is well with you. Owen Sheehan, good morning to you.
Very good morning.
Anybody who's been just listening to us on OTB Sports Radio will have been treated to your version of Lady in Red, which I heard a couple of times, but actually just listening to the audio of it alone, it's a beautiful thing. I actually can't get it out of my head now. It's like one of those little earworms.
Really all you need on this Friday morning. I'm sure it'll pick you up and you won't hear a better rendition than any song over the course of the weekend.
And drop you down in your head.
Basically.
And you've promised to give us your own version of it before we go off air.
Oh, without question.
About 10 o'clock this morning. So
you can just replay that. Nobody will know the difference.
For viewers to stay tuned for. How's life?
Very well.
Yeah.
How are you?
Good, yeah, flying it. The weather's picked up on, so my mood goes with the weather, you know.
Your vitamin D.
Onomatopoeia, is that what they call it?
Your mood goes with it. Is that onomatopoeia? No.
Is that something? No, that's something
Onomatopoeic is when a sequence of vowels align in a sentence.
No. Is it?
It is.
So
I don't know. I'm sure you'll find the word very shortly.
There is some sort of word for it. Anyway, I'm very excited about everything that's been happening around the country over the last few days.
Such as?
This particularly.
Her Royal Highness, Hurl.
She's pretty good.
I could see, yeah. She's better than Leo Varadkar at swinging a hurl anyway.
It appears that way. And great advertisement, as I said, on your way for canning hurls as well.
I didn't notice that, but you eagle-eyed.
There we go, look.
The stamp on it there.
Yeah. I'd say, like, Kensington will be sold out of canning hurls in no time.
They need to set up a shop over there.
And then himself with the O'Neills as well, giving it a bit of a bash. The positioning of the ball suggests to me, you probably remember when you were a young fella, like there'd be lads playing football who didn't really have a huge amount of interest in it, and the technique wouldn't have been great, and they'd like fling the ball up in the air to solo it, and then it'd eventually land like 10 seconds later and they'd tip it on the foot.
Poor technique.
That has a little bit of a bang of that off it.
Do you think so?
Yeah, a little bit. Look, where's that going?
Well, obviously he's side-footing, or that's coming off the outside of the boot there, and he's shanking that wide, but I think the way he dropped the ball there actually looks okay. Unless
he's lined up perpendicular to the goal and he's just about to sort of curve a nice one.
Could be, yeah.
Black spot sort of thing.
Yeah, sort of Dier Connolly, Prince William sort of mash-up there, it seems. I'm trying to think, would Prince William have been better off swinging a hurl at something? Would he played a bit of polo maybe? And
you think the
skills would have aligned?
Oh, that's not a bad show.
I'm sure Kate would have played a bit of hockey in her time, so maybe she was actually well set to swing a hurl. She kicked the football as well. And
why do you think she played hockey?
I don't know. I just
making sort of fast generalisations.
Of the upper class.
There we go. There we go.
Yeah. That is is his technique wrong there? Is his left hand over his right?
It's ridiculously wrong.
Yeah. Again, I'm not the person to commend anybody for their hurling technique or not, but is that a...
Oh, that was bad. And even the height of where he's trying to get at with that is just...
But it's a tiny hurl, let's face it.
I'd also imagine that what you're trying your level best to do in that scenario, from their point of view, is to just not embarrass yourself. Like take a big air swing.
True, but then, I mean, you see more at one with the public if you do embarrass yourself.
You're like one of the... There's a bit of video here of them, the two of them at it yesterday. Thanks, forward. She had a bit of that technique going on there, which I hadn't fully appreciated from the stills pictures. They all fling it in the air and sure, let's see what happens.
Does everyone now get a cheer for simply completing a solo?
I think if you complete a solo, if you're in that environment, under that pressure, there we go. It's not
desperate technique, really. I mean, no drop down.
Let the ball come to you. Let the ball come to you.
Absolutely. I suppose for the first time playing it, it's not too bad. But we can't be cheering our new GAA players just for completing one solo. Otherwise, our standards as a country have just dropped dramatically low.
Have we a bit more video footage? no, that's fine. Yeah, right, we have it. Let's see.
So
desperate.
it turns out the still picture actually does him way more of a justice. He is not doing his best Diarmuid Connolly impression. He's actually just terrible at soloing the ball. But, you know, good on them. He at least tried the proper drop down onto the foot, and it didn't come off for him. But we appreciate the effort all the same.
Yeah, there we go. Bernard Brogan doing his thing. Anyway, listen, the audience have enough of us talking about the Royals. Isolde Cody has been in touch today that a Westmeath man and a Kerry man critiquing hurling technique. Dear God, this is the apocalypse.
About Westmeath Division 1 hurling county, Kerry about to be a Division 1 hurling county.
Absolutely, I'll take that straight back.
Like with the mumps and all, Kerry hurling still managing to get back up to Division 1.
Exactly.
Or on course to do so.
Hurling strongholds.
Have none of that.
Tallaght, you watched the game last night. It was interesting watch. I couldn't believe that Ireland, we'll talk to Ruth Fahy about it a little bit later in the show, but they didn't thump them about 4 or 5-0, and that sort of thing can. My main observation out of it, I know they're missing a couple of players, but that come back to haunt them at some point. Like Ireland were unbelievable at getting the ball to within striking distance, like literally, and then just not being able to really convert. The couple of really good chances of the early in the first half, but anyway, they get out of dodge, 1-0 win, still on track and all that, and I'm sure they'll talk about the positives afterwards, but it really should have been 4 or 5-0.
Yeah, it's something that you would say would be a bit of a concern for them later on, hopefully down the track. Thankfully, I think, obviously, they've realised to their detriment already what can happen if you don't put away all your chances, as happened in Athens already. Yeah. So last night, in my opinion anyway, was the biggest potential banana skin for them being in such a position, because you look at Montenegro and you look at Germany possibly being much better than Ireland at this point. They're probably not targeting that top spot, but getting into playoff position is the realistic target for this team at the moment. That win last night was essential to that end. So, like, there's no question they should have won the game 3 or 4-0 last night. But I guess there was almost a haunting reminder of Athens in the last round, where they are 1-0 up. They have all the domination, and there is just a little bit of, hold on a second, the 3 points are not in the bag creeping into the psyche, I'd imagine. And actually getting over the line in the end and winning that game 1-0 is probably a huge fillip for all of them, that they didn't actually kind of succumb to losing 2 points on this occasion. So it was a really good performance. They played a 4-2-3-1. They obviously went with Rihanna Jarrett up front, and a lot of talk about her fitness throughout the week, about whether or not she'd be able to go to full 90.
Back from long injury layoff.
But you could tell from Vera Pauw when she was talking to TV before the game that she was not going to go to full 90. So you wonder if she was fully fit, or if she was ready to go for even the 70 minutes or 60 minutes or whatever she put in. So that's probably something that will come around for next week, where she'll probably have another few match minutes under her belt, and she'll be able to go hammer and tongs. Like, you had someone like Little John coming really into the game in the second half, I thought, in the number 10 role.
How she got player of the match, though? I mean,
over Denise O'Sullivan.
That was wrong. Like, well, she did have a good game. She had a great second half.
Yeah, and Denise O'Sullivan had a great first half. So I think it was either or. Like, one was the player of the first half, one was the player of the second half. I thought
Denise O'Sullivan ran the show.
She did in the first half. I thought that Little John was the star of the second half, no question. O'Sullivan kind of went out of it in the second half. Maybe it was because Greece had a few early moments in the first half, and she was tracking back. She was actually making a couple of tackles and was the metronome in midfield for the team. So, to be fair, I would have given it to O'Sullivan as well. But Little John got it. She should have scored, though, when she cut back in. And had
she should have let it off for Katie McCabe, I think that was.
And there was that effort, there was that chance as well for her, where she blazed over the bar. So they left a lot out there in terms of goals. Thankfully, they didn't leave the 3 points after them, so they're well on track to get a playoff spot. You don't know as well what's going to happen across other groups. Could they potentially get best runner-up? Like, they'll need to get something against Germany. So that's
it seems like
whole
second in the
different
group is really almost the target at this stage. Obviously, haven't dropped a couple of points.
Yeah, like, at the same time, you're looking at players like Katie McCabe, who are clearly of the class to go up against the best teams in the world. And whether or not her talent is replicated across the pitch, obviously that's not the case. I mean, she's probably Ireland's most talented player at the moment, and her set-piece delivery is outrageously good. But there are positions where Ireland will feel they can compete with a team like Germany. It's just up to the management to instill a sort of game plan that might be able to spoil a team like that. Playing a 4-2-3-1, possibly not something we're going to see in those games.
Onomatopoeia, when words sound like the name is their meaning, like buzz, says Darragh O'Teal correctly, correcting me there. And
oh, sorry, yeah,
pathetic fallacy, I think, was the expression.
Yeah, no, I got the wrong definition of onomatopoeia as well, so a bad start all round, Adrian.
Listen, Diane Caldwell with that goal last night. In case you weren't watching and haven't heard about it, goal just before half-time. It was right at the brink of half-time for Ireland to continue their unbeaten record in their Euro 21 qualifying campaign. They beat Greece 1-0 in Tallaght last night. We're going to talk to Ruth Fahy a little bit about that sort of later in the show as well. We'll hear from Vera Pauw too. The FA Cup fifth round last night, Manchester United, pretty straightforward win at Derby. Wayne Rooney's Derby County, as they're now referred to, 3-0 the result there. Ighalo with a couple and Luke Shaw with a pretty unusual goal. Tonight, a couple of games of the Championship there in the League of Ireland after losing out to Shamrock Rovers last week. Dundalk aiming to get their SSE Electricity Premier Division back on track. Six Nations match against France in Paris tomorrow week, still set to proceed. That's despite the outbreak and continuing postponement of various events. The prospect that Premier League games in England could eventually be played behind closed doors is nearing ever closer as well. This weekend in the Six Nations, England up against Wales. Tomorrow, and then Scotland, France on Sunday. Rory McIlroy made a good start on the opening day of the Arnold Palmer Invitational in Florida as well. He's second place at Bay Hill, one shot behind the leader Matt Every, and an 8-race card in the all-weather track at Dundalk this evening that starts at 5:15. Right now, time for the papers. Actually, we'll tell you what's coming up. It's the sports pages in just a couple of moments' time. After that, we're going to talk to Ruth Fahy about that game in Tallaght last night. Alan Quinlan will talk something to do with rugby. We're not quite sure. There's plenty to talk to Quinny about, including the comments of Gavin Henson during the week, so we'll get those for you a little bit later in the day. Andy Mitten will talk about United's win last night in the FA Cup, and is everything back on track for Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. We'll get Andy's thoughts on that. Classic Game Club, meanwhile, will reflect on, we've all been watching France-Ireland from the 2006 Nations, and it was quite the watch. We'll talk to Quinny about that as well, and that piece in full is coming your way at around about 9 o'clock. But right now it is time for the papers.
OTB AM.
All right, 7:42, we're going to start things off, as always, with offtheball.com. John Giles last night on with Nathan talking about Billy Gilmore and his performance for Chelsea, and that's the best he's seen in quite some time, so quite the praise from Ireland's number one football man.
If Gilmore managed to put in a performance like that and didn't get praise from John Giles in particular, you'd be astonished.
Well, he's normally measured as the thing. He doesn't normally get that carried away, particularly after one performance. He'd normally say, well, listen, he's shown a lot of signs. There was obviously enough in it for him to go full hyperbole on it.
Well, he's a John Giles sort of player, is my point. That's it's almost as if Alan Shearer has just watched somebody bang in 4 goals in the Premier League. He tends to, wax lyrical about that. This is a John Giles player, so I expected nothing less from him, but he's worth the hype. He's right. He is looking like he's going to go quite some distance in this game, because he showed signs of a player that isn't just making his first start, that managed to completely stymie Liverpool's attack at times in the first half in the FA Cup midweek. So he looks an unbelievable talent, 5'5", 18 years old. He's with still a bit of development to come in his years. This is
John Giles incarnate. I presume there was a lot of Happy Gilmore headlines, was there?
There actually wasn't.
Oh, that would have been tab in the morning, wouldn't it?
I don't think there was a single Happy Gilmore the next morning, to be honest.
That's a bad miss. Start with the Irish Mirror for you this morning. Big Brother is the headline here in the back, that photograph of Eric Dier from that incident during the week. Eric Dier leapt into the stands because he feared for the safety of his younger brother. It was the one sort of line that was absent from a lot of the commentary and the column inches about it in the immediate aftermath as to why it had actually happened. And it turns out that Eric Dier had spotted initially somebody abusing himself and the Tottenham players in general, and then had continued his way down the tunnel before he looked up and saw his younger brother confronting this fan, and at that point obviously that triggered him to get up there and do something about it. The FA are still out as to whether they themselves are going to take action on it, so we shall just have to wait and see on that one. And Michael Scully writing here that Ireland and Ulster in workout excuse me, this was Ireland, as Michael Scully reports, ramping up their preparation for next weekend's clash against France by taking on Ulster at the sports campus.
The back page of the London Times this morning is police to quiz Dier after fan altercation. So the Met Police wanting to interview Eric Dier, his brother and the football fan who was involved in the altercation at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium on Wednesday night. Also reporting this morning, Martin Ziegler, handshaking ban over virus, Premier League banning pre-match handshakes between players until further notice, citing medical advice. And we owe Wales one, says Eddie Jones, announcing his team for tomorrow's Six Nations match at Twickenham. I think
we owe
pretty obvious.
Blank one, just whoever they happen to be playing in any given week.
Well, particularly Wales after what they did to them last year. That was a grand slam. We all thought after they hammered us first day last year, it was like grand slam for England, easy peasy. And then Wales came along and actually just snatched it from them.
The Welsh juggernaut. Irish Examiner, Diane, they say here, obviously reflections on Tallaght last night. Caldwell strike keeps Ireland's Euro dreams on course, and plenty more as well, including reflections on United last night. And up at the top, class act, former Cork star James Masters come to the aid of an old Kerry rival. Nice photograph inside of Seamus Gatland, the former Kerry player, and his family. You can see it there. And it was a case of a Corkman helping out a Kerry man, Owen, which is unheard of. You have to laugh. This was, as the caption says, their newborn daughter Evie at their home in Kearns last night. James Masters, along with his Garda colleagues, helped get baby Una, to hospital in Cork on time.
I didn't see that.
Yeah,
Scanlon, absolute legend of Kerry football. Like, when you talk about an unheralded hero of the sport, he epitomises that.
Yeah.
Couldn't kick a ball for his life, but could field it, and was an absolutely key part of that midfield. Back page of the Irish Sun this morning is hands off, Dier feared for brother safety, and hands free, Prem League's band shakes, and Beru Tal, pain for Wayne as United cruise it. There's Odie and Ighalo celebrating last night, and Pauw is in awe again. Vera Pauw hailing her girls in green for holding firm against Greece in Tallaght. Diane Caldwell with the winning goal.
The Irish Daily Mail for you this morning, Slovak shock. It says here, this is the news from Philip Quinn and Rory Keane, that Euro playoff concerns as virus spreads. Ireland's 2020 playoff against Slovakia next month in doubt, they write here, due to the fears of the spread of coronavirus. And the particular piece of note here, the Crunch meeting, the game that is set to take place in Bratislava on March 26th, but a school closure in the Slovak capital due to fears over virus outbreak has cast doubt now, they say, over the fixture. So we'll see what happens there. Iggy Pop's Rooney's bubble is the other one there. That's Odie and Ighalo last night. And Celtic to get the title, an exclusive here, if virus ends SPL prematurely. Right, Stephen McCann and John McGarry, I would make the point that you could probably do that with the SPL. Most seasons, about 60-70% of the way through, that you could just decide, listen, you're 40 points clear now, we'll just pull the plug for the rest of the season.
How can you not finish the season? Like, how is it possible for them to say, yeah, it's fair enough for us to not play these games behind closed doors?
Well, I think even in other leagues on where you've a team that are 22 points clear at the top of the table, is there that much of a...
But it's not about that. It's about actually honouring the competition and playing the full complement of games for competitive reasons till the end of the season. Just play the game behind closed doors if you're that concerned about people being contagious to one another. They're in the training ground every day, I'd assume.
Even they have lost interest in their own league.
Yeah, like, they're existing within the same... Nobody from a different part of Scotland is going to bring something totally different to the risk you're already exposing yourself to walking down the street in Glasgow or going into the training ground every day. I just don't understand why they wouldn't play them behind closed doors.
Well, they also say relegation to the Championship could also be settled by league chiefs, which is the shitty end of it.
Yeah, like, I get why they wouldn't want to have 30,000 people in a public space gathering if they wanted to contain this thing, but I just don't understand why behind closed doors isn't an option. Back page of The Guardian is Odie and Ighalo celebrating. He ruined Rooney's reunion. 2 goals by the Nigerian striker helped Manchester United ease past battling Derby and earn their place in the FA Cup quarter-finals. And out of pocket, writes Gerard Maher, virus outbreak to cost England a chance of taking £5 million jackpot.
The Irish Times for you this morning, Ighalo double seals Rooney and Derby out, sends Rooney and Derby out. Also photographs from Tallaght last night, Caldwell strike keeps Republic on track, writes Emmett Malone. That's the Irish Times.
The back page of the Herald is Reds rout Rams, no cup of joy for Rooney as United see off Derby. We need to score more, says Pauw after win. And Richard Dunn's column is talking about Jose Mourinho and Troy Parrott. Jose antics not helping Parrott, he says.
The Telegraph for you this morning, shots of that game last night, the FA Cup last night, talk about the coronavirus as well, but Premier League fan ban in weeks. This is just on foot of that conversation we've just been having, that they may be prepared to play those games behind closed doors.
The latest on the coronavirus in terms of Cheltenham is reported on the front of the Racing Post. Cheltenham issues advice to festival racegoers on coronavirus. Basically, if you are experiencing symptoms of coronavirus, stay at home. Is that different from any other illness? If you are sick, don't go to Cheltenham. Cheltenham will probably make you more sick in most circumstances. And back page of the Racing Post is turning up the heat. Lamucci's Forest look value to extend Millwall's cold streak away from home. Forest against Millwall tonight at 7:45.
Good photograph from Tallaght on the back page of the Irish Independent this morning there. Also from Colm Keys, New York and GPA in truce over future fundraising, donation and coaching initiatives agreed at Congress meeting to mend strained relations. As Colm Keys there. And Ireland's trip to Paris remains in doubt due to coronavirus fear. From Keane Tracy.
Back page of the Irish Daily Star is Dier straits. Eric Dier feared for the safety of his younger brother when he leapt into the crowd to confront a fan on Wednesday night. Ighalo is rampant for United, is the headline on that. And boost for Irish fans, writes Paul Lennon. So this is a story with a different angle to the Slovakia versus Ireland game. Ireland could be backed by more than 3,000 fans for their Euro 2020 playoff semi-final with Slovakia. FAI have negotiated double the number of tickets for the March 26th showdown in Bratislava from 1,100 to 2,200. So that's twice the UEFA 5% of the stadium's capacity that is laid down in its rules. So all 2,200 seats have now been allocated to the association. So it's just about whether or not this thing actually takes place in front of fans or not.
The Slovaks are like, you want more tickets? Yeah, sure. 3,000? No bother. Right, 7:50 on this Friday morning. We are going to turn to the action in Tallaght last night next. Ruth Fahy is going to join us on the line in just a moment. First, here's the Irish head coach, Vera Pauw, speaking to Stephen Doyle for Off the Ball.
You've just let your goal scorer go there. Diane Caldwell, brilliant occasion for her, but as I was saying to her as well, herself and Louise are a really good partnership, but they are meant to be defending goals, not scoring them.
Yeah, that is their job. They've done that absolutely brilliantly. Defensively, it was so good. At the end, it was nerve-wracking,
yeah.
Nerve-wracking, because they were just putting players in, and if you just whack the balls from the back high forward, and always a ball can drop wrong. But those two in the centre, they were like tigers, really.
Yeah. And the set piece was something you'd obviously worked on in training, and it's always good when those things come off in a game.
Yeah, that is so nice. That's the joy of the whole team, because we've been working so hard on that. We knew that the goalkeeper would stay away. We should have scored more goals, and then it would collapse maybe, but they smelled that they could get something out of this game again while the game was going on. At halftime, we brought in that we wanted to play a bit more opportunistic, so more pressure on their goal, and that happened. But if you then don't score, then you start to lose gaps, and then you need to reorganize. And at the end of the game, they were just putting balls high into our penalty box. And we've defended very, very well. They actually haven't had a chance. I think maybe one chance they had. And but over the whole game, that's good. But it's just good defending.
So would you feel then that your team has progressed from the last game against Greece, because we know there was that goal in added time that Greece scored? So would you say that your team has improved, they've learned from that?
Yeah, but that would be easy to say, yeah? I mean, if it would have been dropped wrongly and they would have scored, then you would have asked, haven't you learned from me? So, but we were alert on it, and we knew what would happen at the end, and maybe they were, because of that, more prepared.
Do you think you'll call any more players in for next week? Extra players?
Yeah, we've called in Stephanie Roach already.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, Stephen might have had the inside line there, given that Stephanie was sitting alongside him for analysis of that game last night. Ruth Fahy, good morning to you.
Good morning, guys. How are you?
Good. Job done, but it was tight in the end. Tighter probably than Vera Pauw, I'm sure, would have liked.
Yeah, definitely. Job done, as you say. First and foremost, 3 points, but it was extremely tight in the end. I actually went back and watched the second half this morning for my sins. I think they kind of lost the flow of what they had in the first half. Obviously, Greece sat back massively, more than they would have expected in the opening 45, and Ireland had control of possession. And then in the second half, what Greece did, they changed the formation. They brought on a couple of sparky players who first them, and Ireland just seemed to struggle a little bit with that. They lost their momentum, but at the same time, as you say, job done, 3 points, didn't concede as they did away to Greece back in November.
Yeah, and it was such a good time to score, obviously, as well, just before half-time. But in so many ways, Ireland created so many opportunities, got in so many great positions. It was just that final third where it was so frustrating to watch in so many ways, because they were doing what seemed to be the hard work and not being able to put it away. What is that? Rihanna Jarrett obviously just coming back from injury. There's no Leanne Kiernan in the squad at the minute because she herself is injured. Is it down to those small little things, do you think, Ruth, or is there something greater there that they very easily could have come a cropper last night?
I think it's a combination of factors. I think Rihanna was probably nullified last night. She was, it's very tightly marked. Greece had done their homework. The same with McCabe. I don't think we saw an awful lot of her last night. She did actually move centrally in the second half, tried to get her on the ball a little bit more. Those kind of moments, I think what we see from Ireland, they tend to bypass the midfield. They look for those channel balls into like Rihanna, into Heather Payne, into Katie. Sometimes they come off beautifully, and when they do, they create chances. often they don't, and it's just about having that alternative when that doesn't come off.
Yeah.
I've got 2 little dogs running around here. I'm just going to let them out.
Oh yeah, listen, that's the important stuff. Don't worry about us if that stuff crops up. Don't worry about us.
But one positive I would say, because we didn't see Katie as much in the ball, because we didn't see Rianne as much in the ball, we saw other players step up. And for me, a massive positive last night was Ruth Littlejohn. I thought she was absolutely superb, completely deserved her player of the match performance. She brought so much energy. She kind of filled in that role where Denise O'Sullivan had been. We always see O'Sullivan the number 10. Ruth Littlejohn came in there. Denise O'Sullivan dropped back. What that meant was she was able to be more of the engine O'Sullivan, whereas Littlejohn got in the ball, created more things, had 2 massive chances. I think the first in the 55th minute where she really should have pulled it back for Katie McCabe, and the second in the 75th minute, her shot just drifting over the bar. So I thought she was superb, really was, and a couple of other standouts as well. Denise, as always, we know, I think every game we see, people start to realise that she is literally, as Vera Pauw said, one of the best players in the world. I thought Anya Gorman did really well. I thought she struggled a little bit initially, but I thought she grew into the game. And as Katie was pulled centrally, Anya was able to get more forward and create a couple more attacks. So lots of positives. But as you say, that final ball, it's not quite there yet, and it does kill them at times.
Yeah, and Anya obviously just come in pre-season at the minute as well. That probably, she said herself last night after the game, that probably feeds into some of that. How fixable, just in terms of that capacity to be able to, they have scored probably enough goals. I know Vera Pauw was saying after the game last night that they could do with scoring a few more. You would hate to see them be so dominant against another team, for example, and maybe not get that goal. How fixable is all of that, Ruth? Looking at it, you obviously haven't watched it back. How fixable is all of that?
Yeah, I think it's fixable. I don't think it's time to get too harsh in that aspect. Like, when you look at the chances that they had, the 2 best chances, I think, fell to Littlejohn. There's also one early in the first half where Rianne Jarrett got up the channel and Heather Payne just headed over. It's just about being clinical. It's not as if they're not creating any chances. They created 4 or 5 really good chances, and it's just about taking them. I think that sentence, we said they're just not being clinical enough, we've actually repeated that after every single game so far in the qualifying campaign. So creativity could be a bit better. They could create more, but it's just about taking those chances when they appear.
In terms of the formation, Ruth, is this where we're set now in terms of what Pauw wants to do? Like, I mean, you mentioned Denise O'Sullivan there and how instrumental she was in the 2 at the base of midfield. You almost get the sense that you could almost anchor that midfield on her own from there, that you can almost push a further body forward if you're in search of more goals. Perhaps if that's what we're talking about this morning, the search for more goals.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a different way to look at it. I don't think Pauw would take that risk. As you say, they play like that. They play forward to back, 2 defensive central midfielders, 1 ahead in the 10 position and 3 attacking players. I think you're right. I think Denise O'Sullivan is that good that she actually could sit in front of the back 4. But as we've said before, she is the engine, but she's also the creator. And if she does step into that creative role, and we do leave that gap in front of the back 4, I don't think Pauw is going to take that risk in any match. Even Montenegro away isn't going to be as easy as anyone expects. That's on next week, the 11th of March. But I actually think it worked quite well last night. I actually preferred seeing Denise O'Sullivan sitting back. So with the absence of Megan Connolly, it was O'Sullivan and Fahy sitting back in front of the back 4. And because Littlejohn has now gone and proven herself, she actually, like I said, she brought the energy. She created. She did track back when she needed to. I thought she was superb, because if we can put her there and keep her there, then O'Sullivan can have that engine role in front of the back 4 beside Fahy. I don't think that's going to change. I think Pauw has seen something there, and I'm not sure that's going to change next week.
Was there a shift from Greece after about a quarter of the game? Because it seemed in the opening 20 minutes or so, Ireland were constantly putting that ball between the back 3 and the left wing back, or a back 5, whatever way you want to look at the Greek defence. And that ball sort of dried up after a while, Ruth. I'm not sure, was that a shift from Greece, or did they just go a little bit deeper to stop that ball going in?
I think it was a shift in Greece. I think you're right. I thought the opening 20-25 minutes was really calm and controlled from Ireland. You could see, like you said, that channel ball, Rihanna spinning off the central defender was really effective, and same on the other side for Heather Payne. I think Greece kind of wised up to that, after about half an hour or so. And also, it doesn't always work. That's the thing. I mean, you can see very clearly when Dan Caldwell and Louise can get on the ball what they want to do. Sometimes it works really well, and sometimes it just breaks down. And again, it's that final ball that we cite. But I would love to see Ireland actually go through central midfield a little bit more. I've already cited that triangle of O'Sullivan, Fahy and Littlejohn, they're all technically excellent on the ball. I know it's difficult to play against the likes of Greece, who are extremely compact. They don't allow that ball to come too centrally, but we do have that ability. It just rarely happens now. There was efforts made. There was moments where O'Gorman was trying to get Katie McCabe, and she came centrally into feet. It just broke down. I think Ireland are good enough to kind of vary their attack a little bit more, for sure.
It must feel pretty good, though, given Greece were basically time-wasting from the 12th minute and like taking time to tie their shoelaces and take kick-outs and free kicks and all that sort of stuff. Must feel pretty good to get the 3 points and come away with a win, and from that perspective alone.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I think people will say it was only 1-0, Ireland should have scored more, but I mean, don't underestimate how difficult it is to play against a team like Greece. Like you say, time-wasting. You know, the majority of the first half, they had 11 players back in their own half. They're extremely physical. Now, they weren't as nasty last night as they were back home in November. Extremely physical, really hard to break down. And in the second half, they had 2 decent chances that went just wide of Horahan's post. So I think you could see, you know, after the game how delighted Vera Pauw was. I think that was completely justified because she knew what a big result that is. And the fact is, Ukraine have no points at the moment, but they played Germany twice, Ireland once. They have to go on and play Greece twice, and I can guarantee that they won't get 6 points from Greece. I don't think so at all. And that's what we're looking at in this group. We're looking at second place, hopefully getting one of 3 best runners-up spots, which would mean automatic qualification, or going to the playoffs with the remaining 5 of the teams. So, you know, for me, it was a massive result. I think you could see the smiles on their faces, and they're totally deserved.
We've mentioned, obviously, a couple of the key players repeatedly there, Denise O'Sullivan being one of them, but on Risha Littlejohn, Ruth, obviously, it's almost like, granted she's a player with about 40 caps to her name, but it's almost like finding a new player. I'm sure from Vera Pauw's point of view, she'd been out of the loop a little bit, and then suddenly she gets her move to West Ham. I think she signed up till the end of the season. Is she maybe playing with a bit of a chip on her shoulder now, Risha, in that obviously she'd been out and now she's back in and has really taken her opportunity?
I think she's just playing like a player who just found her confidence again, found her groove again. Like you say, she was involved in the last campaign initially with Colin Bell. She was in for a couple of games, then lost his confidence in her, and she was dropped out of the squad. She played, I think it was with London Bees over in the UK, and then was left out of contract at the end of the 2018-19 season. And what happened is she got a chance at West Ham. She got given a trial. She obviously gave it everything. You can see physically she looks in brilliant shape, like the best I've seen her over the last decade. She's obviously worked really, really hard. And the one thing about Risha Littlejohn is that her technical ability has never been questioned. I think when I was in camp, like literally 9 or 10 years ago, she was there and she was excellent, excellent technically. And we saw that last night as well. So for her, it was just about getting her physical fitness back, getting her confidence back. And she's playing at West Ham, playing alongside the likes of Jan Kiernan. And you could see that last night because it wasn't just her ability on the ball. It was when she wasn't on the ball. I was watching her, and her work rate last night was exceptional. And she managed to create her own chance in the 55th minute when she actually dispossessed the defender. Like I said, should have pulled back to Katie McCabe in the end and just fired wide. But no, it's someone who's found her confidence. She's a bit of a chip on the shoulder. She's definitely probably got a point to prove. She probably feels like she should have been retained for the entire campaign last time, but it's like you say, it's like we rediscovered a new number 10, and what that gives Vera Pauw is her options. Gives her options in midfield, which is great because we need that. We really need that, and I think, like I said, that was the biggest plus for me last night. Wish she had scored; she deserved it, but she was brilliant.
Yeah, good ground out win in the end, and on to Montenegro. Ruth, thanks a million for taking the call.
Thanks, million, guys. Happy Friday.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
you too. Ruth Fahy on the line there, reflecting on the 1-0 win over Greece in Tallaght last night, and onwards and upwards for the girls in green. You would hope over the next while we'll keep an eye on them as they progress into next week as well. Right, it's 4 minutes past 8 on this Friday morning. Plenty more to come across the show. Alan Quinlan is going to be with us a little bit later on as well, and we're going to talk to Andy Mitten about United last night, the latest episode 2 of the Classic Game Club was going to be Ireland-France, looking back at the 2006 Nations. But before we finish on the Irish women's team in Tallaght last night, that win, let's hear from the players. Here's Denise O'Sullivan, the match winner Diane Caldwell, and first the Irish captain Katie McCabe, all speaking to Stephen Doyle.
stack really. I'm really proud of how the team performed tonight, how we dug deep, and yeah, kept them out and created all the chances, and yeah, got the 3 points in the end. That's one of our strengths, obviously, is set pieces, and when you've got Louise and Diane and Ruth Fahy and stuff in the box, you just have to. It's my job to put it in there, and obviously for them to do the rest, and they did that tonight.
Congratulations anyway on your
Stephen.
goal. And I was going to say first, you and Louise are a brilliant partnership, but you're meant to be defending, not scoring goals.
Yeah, we're normally keeping them out, but I mean, if a goal comes, we'll be happy to take it. Obviously tried to hit Louise with her height, and she's so dangerous on the set pieces. So we tried to hit her back post, and we worked on me just following in on that ball, whether or not she can get a goal or just knock it down, and for me to be there in the right place. And yeah, it was funny how it all worked out. It was just as we'd planned, so it was nice.
You happy with the celebration?
I didn't quite know what to do, but yeah, my girlfriend was in the crowd, so I wanted to go over and dedicate the goal to her, because she'd made all the journey from Germany. So I don't think the other girls were on the same page as me though, so I just left it on my own, so that was a bit embarrassing. But
No, it was brilliant.
Yeah, it's something we've worked on this week, is obviously that front three, front four going forward, and I thought we created a lot of chances. Any other night we would have put a few more away, but look, we got the job done, and 3 points.
Denise O'Sullivan, I know it's only a couple of minutes after the game was finished, but how are you feeling after the performance?
I'm absolutely delighted. The goal was to go in and get 3 points. We set up to do that, and we got 3 points, so I'm happy. It was a great shift from all the girls, so we're very happy.
Regarding your own performance, is that one of the best you put in the green shirt?
I mean, it was alright, I guess. I think the most important thing was the 3 points, and that's what I'll do for the team, is just work hard, put in a shift, get on the ball and try and create stuff. But I think every single player on the pitch tonight was fantastic, and credit to them. It's going to take us time, but as I said, we could have scored more goals. We created the chances, so that's a good sign at least. But I think for us now to work on is just finishing those chances and getting more goals.
You're from not too far down the road here. Is it a bit surreal when you're kind of coming out, leading your international team out onto the pitch like this? Just, I suppose, not a stone's throw from where you grew up.
Yeah, no, it's really special. I mean, to lead out the girls, full stop, is an honour. I love it, and to do it in my hometown in Tallaght is even more special. Having the family and friends in the crowd. Yeah, I don't get sick of the feeling. Definitely not. It's really special, and as I said, an absolute honour.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
Looking for a football show with a bit of a twist?
So I know the likes of Griezmann's big into his fashion.
You wanted a lot. One question he actually asked me was, could he make his studs light up when he runs?
Team 33, the football magazine show for the football purists.
Yeah, the Nike Mercurials from 1998, if you just show that boot to an entire generation of people, and they just get instantly nostalgic and remember everything from that era.
The very best interviews with the cult heroes of the past, and a look at the cultural side of football. Team 33, live at 9 p.m. every Friday on OTB Sports Radio.
American Football 101 on Off the Ball.
With the Aer Lingus College Football Classic.
Known by many as the winningest team in college football history, the Michigan Wolverines are an iconic football program. Home to the second largest stadium in the world, known as the Big House. It has a capacity of 107,601, but it has hosted crowds of over 115,000. Michigan has won the national championship 11 times, with their most recent win coming in 1997 under coach Lloyd Carr.
American Football 101 on Off the Ball.
With the Aer Lingus College Football Classic.
OTB AM.
All right, 9 minutes past 8 on this Friday morning. Delighted to have you along with us here on OTBAM, the sports breakfast show from Off the Ball. Alan Quinlan, good morning to you.
Good morning.
How's life?
Fine, thanks, yeah.
We've just all been indulging ourselves in the Ireland-France 2000 game from the Six Nations earlier in the week, and the Classic Game Club is coming your way at 9 o'clock, where myself and Owen and Ger and Neil sit down and pick through it in fine detail. Where were you?
I could have been part of it, but in round 6 for Munster away to Pontypridd, I injured my shoulder,
right,
and I was picked in the England A team, and back then, nearly a week out, the team would be announced.
You were picked in the England A team,
or the Irish A team, played England.
Quinny, what happened there?
In Northampton, they won 31-30, the Ireland A's. on the Friday night in Northampton, and the following day in Twickenham, England beat Ireland 50 points to 18, walloped them. There was 5 changes then for the Scotland game. Do you remember that one?
Yes,
Who were the 5 people?
O'Gara, Stringer, Hayes,
Easterby and Shane Horgan. Simon Easterby played in the A game against England. Instead of me, he was on the bench. So it could have been me playing the Ireland A game and won the 31-30 in Northampton.
Only for the injury.
Made my Six Nations debut the following week against. I could have been one of the 5, but I wasn't. But Simon went on to play many times for Ireland, and we played together many times as well. So
you were playing in France that weekend? Yeah,
we were playing the Ireland A team. So I got back. The France-Ireland game was around the 18th or 19th of March. So I made it back from my shoulder injury that I missed at the start of the Six Nations with, and I played in the Ireland A game. We were beaten 31-25 the night before the senior match, and we came to Paris then the next morning, and I went to the game. It was incredible. It was phenomenal, and I think I've said this many times before. It really changed the whole Irish psyche about having the ability to go and win in France, and not just for the national side, but for the provinces as well. We had won with Munster. It was one of our goals, I think, in 98. 99 we beat Colombia in France for the first time for any provincial team had won in France. But Drico's 3 tries that day, that really changed the kind of mentality of Irish rugby players, and I think it had an effect on lots of sports people. You know, he was phenomenal with 6 minutes to go in the game. Ireland were 25-17 down.
He seemed to inspire those around him as well onto greater things, like Henderson and Raj and all these lads suddenly nipping at the line in a way that they...
Well, when you think of the debutants against Scotland, John Hayes and Stringer and Rog and Mick Galway had come back into the side. Shane Horgan didn't play in France. He was injured. Kevin Maggs played in the wing. But there was a lot of big characters there, and it was an incredible win. It was incredible to be there and to kind of experience it and as
go
a
on
fan.
The lash afterwards, I'm sure.
No, I went on the lash the Friday night. We had a big night on the Friday night. And I remember we were staying in like 31-25 away to France A was a decent result for us. We were quite unlucky because it was a very nerve-wracking situation. You're literally in the middle of nowhere in France playing against a raucous crowd, against big massive bruisers who were incredibly aggressive, and the A teams back then wasn't about kind of playing too many young fellows. It was playing lots of older players to win those matches, and seasoned internationals. In France, I remember at the time, had so many of them, and so we did quite well. We enjoyed the night. I remember the nightclub we went to, there was a swimming pool in the nightclub.
All right.
So
that doesn't seem like a health and safety risk at all.
Oh, it was it was like just outside the kind of door, but you had these big glass doors that would slide back, and you could have a drink out there, and
hop in for
a lot of the boys went swimming in the suits. I remember David Wallace was the first one in the suit, just straight into the pool. It wasn't a great idea. It was a good idea at the time, but not about 15 or 20 minutes later when you're half an hour probably away from your hotel and you're wringing wet. But it was an unbelievable weekend, and I just thought that it was remarkable in a way that Drico really kind of showed his sensational ability in that game. And France were missing a few players. I think they had a couple of injuries, but it really changed the landscape and the mentality of a lot of Irish teams going forward.
I want to talk to you as well about Gavin Henson's comments. I don't know if you've seen them this week. He was just done a feature interview with Wales Online and was asked about the Warren Gatland comments on this show last year, where he said that maybe there was one player in his time, and Gavin Henson was kind of, I don't know, was he at pains to sort of let people know that it wasn't him by saying that there should have been a full-blown investigation post those comments, and that any player found to be cheating is essentially stealing a living and should be given a jail sentence.
Very extreme to say that they should be given a jail sentence, but it's a very debatable topic, isn't it, regarding the sanctions and allowing players to come back from suspensions. And it's happened in South Africa. So many players have served bans, young players have served bans. There was an article this week in on the BBC website again about Craven Week, and a young player was mentioned who played for the Blue Bulls and then tested positive for steroids and came back and played 2 years later. And it's happened so many times in France and or in South Africa. And I think the whole Warren Gatland comments when he was finishing up about the possibility of he suspected one player was taking steroids in Wales, he retracted that a little bit and kind of watered it down a little bit afterwards. But
Henson is saying in his comments,
yeah,
the full thing, that actually they're far more fulsome. He's saying, I know people who did this.
He knows people who left.
There should be an investigation after what he said.
I think there should be. It should be looked back on and but look, in our time there, Adrian, it was a very kind of I wouldn't say blasé, but you kind of knew when the testers were coming, and people could probably avoid the testing process.
Sorry to
it wasn't as stringent.
He said that players
people
would literally run out.
I never saw that in with Munster or Ireland when we were tested. You know, everybody would have to be available. You didn't get any prior notice. Many times in Thomond Park, I remember being at training sessions where testers arrived and everybody had to stay and nobody could go after training.
Be, I would think.
Yeah, either prior to training or after training, because sometimes we'd train and you'd come off the field and there'd be people there with folders waiting and a couple of players would be pulled out of a hat and you'd have to stay and be tested. But everybody, you couldn't just run off and say, well, certain players aren't available. Yeah, but it probably did happen. It was probably much more looser than it is probably nowadays. And he's very, very strong and adamant in that. But, you know, the culture of doping in rugby and the suspicions have always been there, and they're still there to this day. And
you're not surprised to hear what he said then, in terms of his experience of essentially talking about Welsh players?
I can't say that I said it, and I've said this many times, and people say I'm trying to defend the sport. I've never seen or had a culture. There was no culture in Munster of which they're the guys you see you're with every day, if you like, your provincial teammates. I never suspected and looked at my teammates and said they're after making extraordinary gains over the summer or putting on 5 or 6 kilos. I'd never seen that. We always heard different sort of rumours about particularly South Africa and France, but I'd never seen it, you know. But maybe I was a bit naive and myself, but they're very, very strong comments from him, and definitely there should be an investigation and they should look back and see. But what can they do now? You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, they definitely need to start a conversation about it. I mean, it's ludicrous that the thing happened. It didn't do anything about it.
And it's important to say lots of improvements have been made around doping in rugby, and the testing. It needs to get better. Yeah. It needs to get better at schoolboys right the way through.
We haven't long. I want to ask you obviously about Wales, England. The Pivac saying this week that Wales are going to abandon ship on the Fiji style rugby. We're going to play another way.
I don't think they played Fiji style rugby against Ireland or France.
My word's not his, but that's sort of more of it.
It's to buy into that narrative is a little bit untrue, I think, because of course they're trying to move the ball, and that's the style he plays and that's the style he wanted with Scarlets, and when they execute that they can be brilliant. Probably what he means is they need to be a bit more pragmatic, because the same reality applies for Wales as it did for Ireland. Physically, if you lose up front, you're in massive trouble against England. So that's the challenge for them. I see some people writing columns and some of the articles saying that they'll be totally overpowered. They've picked Navidi in the back row, who's a brilliant player, and they've taken Falatau and put him on the bench. And are they powerful enough for England? Well, we'll see after tomorrow. It's a difficult situation for Wales. They won the Grand Slam last year, and if England beat them tomorrow, there'll be 3 losses on the bounce. Will we have the same reaction that was there for Ireland last year? This is a Welsh side that got to a World Cup semi-final and won the Grand Slam. So they're kind of in a similar situation to Ireland in 2018, where now it'll be seen as a kind of a disastrous Six Nations for them. But England are very, very powerful, and it'll be really interesting to see, can they kick on, and what's the reaction? Eddie Jones this week is saying that Wales really fired them up. I said it a couple of weeks ago here that I thought the Irish team really fired him up. And
he says it about everybody.
It'll just be. Will there be a bit of bite to it? Will England get a little bit complacent now? Will they have the same kind of bite and intensity? But when England execute, they're a very, very good side, and they can. It'll be interesting to see if they can do that to Wales tomorrow, what they did to Ireland.
Yeah, all right. You've got to leg it. Thanks, William, for coming in. Avoid the swim pool there on the way out, Quinny.
I will. You can get David Wallace in to chat about that story.
We'll have to give him the right reply. Alan Quinlan, as always, on a Friday morning, looking ahead to the weekend's rugby. I'm delighted to say we've Andy Mitten on the line from United We Stand to get into the action last night. Andy, good morning to you. 3-0 win over Derby. Feels like the good times are back.
Yeah, since that terrible Burnley defeat in January, 6 weeks ago, United have played 9 games. They've won 6, they've drawn 3, they're unbeaten. They've had 13 different goal scorers. They've only conceded 2 goals. Bruno Fernandes has made a huge difference. And the mood has lifted. Now, there's always mitigating factors. Beating Tranmere Rovers or Bruges or even Derby County isn't like beating Juventus or Real Madrid. But the mood has been picked up off the floor. The signing of Fernandes has been a huge difference, but there's been real improvements from other players. Luke Shaw had another good game last night. Adrian and Eoin, he started scoring, and nobody's pretending he's a long-term solution, but he wasn't brought in for that. He was brought in because Marcus Rashford was injured, and things are looking better. Other teams are failing. Other rivals for this Champions League spot. And I almost feel fraudulent saying that Manchester United should be pushing for a Champions League spot like it's a big deal, because that should be the minimum requirement for Manchester United. But the team are where they are. It was pretty disastrous in January when they lost 4 games. There's a small matter of the Manchester derby on Sunday. City have got a brilliant record at Old Trafford, and that really needs to change. Just like Everton last week. It was only a draw for United, but it was 4-0 in April. That was probably the worst defeat for Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's side. So, little by little, putting an optimistic face on it. If they can continue to recruit well, continue to offload the players, which Solskjaer sees as being problematic, then things should start to pick up. It's still a fragile confidence. I'm sure there's going to be more setbacks, but if you can just finish this season with a trophy or a European Champions League spot, then that would be a big bonus. Because it's only 6 or 7 weeks ago that moderate people, rather than online lunatics, were thinking Ole Solskjaer is not the man. They were starting to doubt him, and there has to be minimum requirements, and he's meeting them at the moment, and he's got to finish this season strongly. Last season petered out after Paris away. That was a year ago today. United won 2 of the remaining 12 games. That was nowhere near good enough. But this season has got to finish much stronger. Got a very favourable draw in the Europa League. And Norwich away in the FA Cup 6th round. OK, they keep being drawn away. But United beat them easily home and away this season. So there's a realistic prospect of a FA Cup semi-final. So it's not as bad as it looked recently.
Yeah, it'll be a huge success, obviously, to get into the Champions League, and you're right to say it's not as if they're playing Real Madrid or Liverpool, maybe more appropriately every week, but at the same time they're grounding out results now against those teams in a way that maybe they weren't previously. And I wonder, you've mentioned him already there, Andy, in relation to Bruno Fernandes. He'll face another big game last night. He will face, again, tougher opposition, I'm sure, down the track. I wonder how much the recent upturn is to do with the Solskjaer grand plan, or whether Fernandes, and I use this phrase lightly, but whether the Fernandes performances and his influence and impact on games is papering over the cracks to any degree.
You say Liverpool. Some of the teams I mentioned actually win games. Liverpool are losing games at the moment, so it might not be a bad thing if Manchester United played Liverpool at the moment. But I'm afraid, given that Liverpool were knocked out the FA Cup, it's impossible to meet them again this season. And they went out the League Cup early as well. No, I'm being facetious. Liverpool have been brilliant this year, but United fans have been laughing at their misfortune recently. Fernandes, not only on the pitch, he's a real influence in the dressing room. Players are taking notice of him. They respect him, primarily because he's very good. He's a decent person as well. But also, to get into the Champions League, then their bonuses are going to shoot right up. and they were going nowhere near that in January before he came. There were injuries, there were bad injuries, but they're looking much better with him. He's versatile. He's been the best player in just about every game, which is pretty difficult to do. So it's still early for him, but he's had a fantastic start. I think fans, they cut players a bit of slack when they arrive at a club. Fred's probably a good example of that, where he's having a good season now, but he didn't really do anything in his first season, and he's not the only one. But Fernandes has come into a difficult team as well. It cannot be easy in a team like Manchester United, and it was missing its best players. But right from the first game, he showed an attacking intent. He wants to shoot all the time. He wants to move the ball forward, and other players are replicating that, and things are looking much, much brighter.
Yeah,
I think that City is a big game on Sunday, and I'm not actually that confident. Pep Guardiola always gets it right at Old Trafford. So I would be surprised if United managed to avoid defeat against City at home. That's not a sentence I would have said 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah. I think there's definitely also an element of Manchester City at this point that they want to win every single game possible, just to ensure that Liverpool win the league as late as possible, hopefully just capitalising on any further slips by Liverpool. And we're just going to get Andy's line fixed there for a moment. But the point I just want to put to Andy is that it must feel so encouraging for Manchester United fans, this whole Bruno Fernandes thing, because there's just been a trend of recent signings in recent years, and Fred is one of them. The players just look so much worse when they play for Manchester United. That it's been a case for, to a certain degree in the first half of the season for Harry Maguire. Now we're starting to see him come back to a very good level of form, I would have thought, for a centre-back. But Bruno Fernandes has come into the team and straight away has looked very good. So imagine when all the other parts for Manchester United, and I know we've got Andy back in the line now, when all the rest of the parts come together for Manchester United, how good Bruno is going to look for them, because even in the midst of a little bit of chaos, I know it's not as bad as it was now as it was at the start of the season, but in the midst of a little bit of chaos, he has looked exceptional. That must give huge hope for what the ceiling of this guy really is.
I think we might have lost Andy there again. We'll try and re-establish that line and come back to him in a little bit. Yeah, listen, it's fascinating. I know Kenny was on the show. It was the last night or during the week. He was talking about the possibility of getting Pogba back in the pitch and how himself and Fernandes might be the new Silva and De Bruyne. But, I mean, that if is such a massive if at this point. And actually, the more that Fernandes impresses and the more that United team are purring along, like, the less argument there is. Even looking at it, I mean, caught the second half. I haven't watched the Tallaght game last night, but even looking at it last night, and it was Derby, it's all fair. But, like, bringing that guy back into the team who is an uncertain influence at best, like, there's a case that United are now coping perfectly well without him. They can push on and actually get Champions League football. Just get rid of him. Like,
Kenny was making the point yesterday that, you know, getting Pogba back in would actually allow you to have Pogba and Bruno Fernandes together in advanced midfield roles.
Right.
And that is as good as anything you'll find around the Premier League or around Europe in those two positions.
We'll put that to Andy. We've just been debating there. Kenny Cunningham was on us during the week, Andy, and he was talking about the opportunity, let's call it, to get Pogba back in the team and the combination that himself and Bruno Fernandes might offer in that Silva De Bruyne type mould. It's a big if, obviously, but could be one of the most fearsome midfields in the country.
It could, and I'd love it to happen. A lot of United fans have completely given up on Pogba. He wants to leave the club. There are deep suspicions that his reluctance to play is being over-egged, and people expect him to leave in the summer. And I still think he's the most talented player at the football club. He's the one with the best feet. It's all right. Extolling the virtues of Scott McTominay, is a very good player. Fred's a decent player, but Pogba's a bona fide world-class player. And this has been a really bad season for him because of injury. And the dynamic's difficult because he has been the main man in the dressing room, and other players look up to him. I'm talking about Jesse Lingard, Anthony Martial. And when they know he wants to go, I'm not sure that that's a good thing either. And I expect him to leave. I think there's a 10% chance he'll stay and do well. It would need a real recovery, but it's in his interest to recover because there's the European Championships this summer. I doubt that France, even though it's Paul Pogba, would pick him if he's not been playing games for Manchester United. And I'd love his fortunes to turn around. United will not let him go easily. They have not been impressed by the conduct of his agent one bit. They do not want to make it easy for him to leave the club. And while they might not get the stratospheric numbers talked about a year or two ago, with 150 million, they would be extremely reluctant to let him leave for a loss. I'd love Paul Pogba to be thinking now, there's actually real potential in this team. Bring another player or two in the summer and they could be challenging. And Pogba could be a main part of that. He was a top scorer last year. He's versatile. But where does he play now? The role which Fernandes is now making his own, the Paul Scholes role, if you like, people are quite comfortable with him staying there and they're not really uncomfortable with Pogba leaving.
Yeah, they've almost got the perfect opportunity now as well, that things are going well on the pitch, to get rid of Pogba, which they probably might be well advised to grasp. We'll see how it plays out over the next few months. Wayne Rooney obviously almost had, I would probably imagine, the entire stadium at that stage on their feet last night with that free kick that came close at the end, incredibly well tipped over. How much competition is there now for that number one? Is there a genuine competition for the number one jersey, Andy, do you feel, or is it still De Gea's?
Well, I had a good chat with Eric Steele on Monday, the former goalkeeping coach, and he knows far more about goalkeepers than I do. And he made the point that Dean Henderson is doing very well at Manchester United, and he would offer a genuine challenge for David De Gea, which he needs. He said that Romero was brought in as a number two, and he's filled that role perfectly. And when he's been called up, he's played well and he's been solid. There's a couple of very talented young players. I spoke to one, I went to see him a few weeks ago. Kieran O'Hara, plays for the Republic of Ireland, as I'm sure you know. Really nice lad, doing well at Burton in the third tier, but he's not ready yet. I think he'd admit that for the first team. I like the idea of Henderson and De Gea going at it and creating a real tough competition in the way that I've seen Brandon Williams come in and Luke Shaw really up his game, because De Gea has made mistakes. He's not as good as he was. I'd still back him. I'd still stick with him. But I think competition is a good thing for him, and he probably doesn't feel it at the moment. He knows that number one spot is his. But if Dean Henderson came in, now Dean Henderson's going to want to play football, and if you can offer them Champions League football as well, and Henderson and De Gea can be going at it, that's a perfect situation. But it's also a difficult one to bring together, because Henderson is now Premier League proven, and he's playing for a team that might be in Europe themselves next season, and where is the undisputed number one?
Yeah, this derby on Sunday, Andy, probably couldn't have come at a better time for Manchester United. Obviously, it's at Old Trafford as well. What are your thoughts on it?
My thoughts, unfortunately, are I'm sick of seeing Manchester City come to Old Trafford and tactically outwit and outplay and beat Manchester United. I almost wish the game was away, where United have got a far better record. It's got to change, but man for man, I still think City have got a better team than United. And Guardiola, he's a brilliant tactician. I'd love to say to him, if I saw him, if you're so good, why don't you play Ederson as a false nine? Back him up with Bravo. Play yourself, because he's a great player, Guardiola. Bring Brian Kidd in as centre forward. Let's see if he can pull that one off. And if you can do that, then you are truly the master. Having go out of the game, I think United have got to avoid defeat. And the way that they tend to do that is by countering, like they did at Manchester City away, by getting players in who just run and chase every ball. But they have got that creative spark now. With Fernandes, he's an absolute threat. The defence is keeping clean sheets. The defence is playing really well. So I have a cautious optimism. I just think that City are better than United. And I was in the Bernabeu last week and saw them do a tactical number on Real Madrid. And I worry that they're going to do the same on Sunday. And I speak to you a lot. I'm usually optimistic. And I'd love to speak to you Monday morning with Manchester United not having been defeated.
Yeah, well, look, we might just do that. Andy, thanks a million for now.
Thank you.
Andy Mitten, their editor with United. We stand, it is 8th. What's going to happen? I mean, outside if they put Brian Kidd up front.
Well, I'm just looking forward to the battle of the two best left-backs in world football, Luke Shaw against Gabriel Jesus. It's going to be an intriguing tie. It's interesting that he says that he could do a similar number in Manchester United. It wouldn't be the most ridiculous thing in the world, considering United have had success against the top teams because they're good on the counter, when a lesser team has tended to sit back and put on a so-called defensive masterclass. Manchester United have often struggled this season, so another defensive masterclass from Pep Guardiola, could that be in the offing? Potentially.
We're in the window now of Manchester United have turned the corner and they're going to be the greatest team that has ever existed. We're in that window now. So, like, let's roll with that until Sunday and then it gets...
Oh, sorry, you mean the temporary corner that we keep turning.
Yeah.
They will turn the corner for real at some point in the next 24 months. So, could this be the real corner?
Absolutely.
Is what we need to ask ourselves.
Where did it all go right and where do we go from here?
Where did it all go right for Manchester United team?
A reminder as well that Sunday and Off the Ball we're going to have live and exclusive radio commentary of that Manchester derby. Stephen Doyle and Brian Kerr in the commentary box from Old Trafford. Kick off there at 4:30. We'll have plenty and the best of the build-up as well. Nathan and Gary Breen, by the way, are going to be over at Stamford Bridge from 2 o'clock. Chelsea against Everton, also live on Sundays Off the Ball. Right, it is 8:35 on this Friday morning. You're watching OTB AM. It's a sports breakfast show from Off the Ball. Thom Malone is going to join us next on the show with the very latest sports news.
So I think Eoin was not that much in the pool before the programme, so it was going to be a bit of a challenge, although his confidence is pretty high from what I remember. So I think from the looks of it today, he's improved massively. Like, he's got a great stroke.
We're all swimming for a mile, lads.
Yep.
We've got a good mix here. We've got inarguably top of the class. We've got somebody who's...
Don't go on, say it.
Whose like big goal is just to swim the mile. I think that's a legitimate.
Bottom of the class. Go on, say it.
No, I'm not going to talk about
it's okay.
I actually don't think you're bottom of the class anymore. I think you made it past a couple out.
Middle of the road over here then. So it's a pretty good eclectic mix.
Yeah, but you've got solid pace, Adrian.
I've no pace. That's my biggest difficulty. I found the last day. What I found is that I did the. I might not have mentioned this before, but I did the triathlon, the swim part of the triathlon last year, and. I'm not going to say I found it easy, but I'd done a bunch of training for it, and it wasn't as much of a struggle, let's say, as I'd expected to be. The swim that we did down Dunmore.
Yeah, but why was that easier? I would have thought that the sea would have been a much tougher prospect.
It was very tough. Like the different conditions you have from the pool was like obviously the waves. You have a lot of salty water coming at you.
Other people,
elbows and feet coming at you. It's actually.
So you're saying the Dunmore was tougher?
What I'm saying is it was less tough than I had expected it to be.
Okay, sorry.
And spotting where you're going was one of the biggest things. Like you sort of head off because you couldn't see the boy quite regularly. Anyway, enough of that. But so I thought that I was sort of on a decent level, like compared to a lot of other people. So I found that my trajectory has been sort of like that, whereas most people, both of you included, has been very much like that. So I found myself trailing. Flatlining quite a bit until the last session, where about halfway through, a combination of stuff that Bethany had been talking to us about on Monday and stuff that Pete Conway has been doing with us on the Wednesday just came together in one of the lengths, and I kind of felt, Jesus, this actually is starting to feel good.
It's all clicked for you.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that.
The tips Bethany gave were absolutely different level. I thought like it was just the technical stuff. There's almost too much to think about sometimes, I find. Like trying to just keep it in a perfect straight line, trying to get the complete mechanics of the stroke. The one goggle breathing thing, that's pretty tricky as well.
Without like inhaling half the pool of
without
water
drinking the pool, yeah.
How are you finding it?
I've drank a lot of chlorine in the last few weeks. It's literally...
It's a great coronavirus antidote, apparently.
It must be the reason why I haven't contracted it yet. But yeah, like some of the lads like bring bottles of water and stuff to the pool with them and stuff, which I find hilarious. Given the day that I need to bring a bottle of water with me to hydrate myself in the swimming pool is not a day that I foresee coming.
I'm going to offer the idea that you like swallowing mouthfuls of chlorine-filled water is not actually hydrating you.
Well, something is certainly hydrating me.
Anyway, you can keep across all our updates as we go. We'll be posting stuff on social media and regular updates here as well. Half the off-the-ball team taking on the Swim for a Mile Challenge, brought to you by Swim Ireland. The challenge itself, of course, supporting Temple Street Children's University Hospital Foundation. You can get lots more, learn more about it. Sign up for Swim for a Mile Challenge. You can visit swimforamile.com. And by the way, if you're thinking, there is still plenty of time. If you wanted to get on board now and do the challenge, there's still plenty of time to get on board on the bottom rung of the ladder and still have yourself up to shape. And also, if you're thinking, I'm just never going to get a mile done, there's a half a mile challenge as well. So get up there, get all the details. It's a great sport to be involved in, I have to say, from somebody who's in their early 40s and gets injured at the thought of a run. It's a great sport to be involved in. So swimforamile.com, get yourself up there and check it out.
We start with football.
Go for it.
The ladies last night, Dan Caldwell's goal just before half-time preserved the Republic of Ireland's unbeaten record in the Euro 2021 qualifying campaign. The girls in green beat Greece by 1-0 at Tallaght Stadium last night. The result leaves Ireland second in Pool I, just 2 points behind leaders Germany. And Vera Pauw's side are next away to Montenegro on Wednesday. Caldwell, though, was delighted to score the winner on her 75th cap.
Yeah, I'm really proud. Every cap I'm really honoured to have. So it was obviously nice to get capped off with the goal as well today. But today it was just all about the 3 points. I know it's cliche to say, but it's job done, and now it's on to Montenegro because we have to win again.
An Ighalo brace helped Manchester United progress in the FA Cup 6th round last night. The Premier League side got the better of Derby by 3-0. United will travel to Norwich in round 6, and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer says he's happy with Ighalo's impact.
Doing what it says on the tin, and what we asked for when we signed him is coming in, playing up front, different type of striker, scores, get chances every game, and today could have had another couple, and very, very happy with him.
Following defeat to Shambolic Rovers last week, Dundalk will look to get their SSE Electricity Premier League defence back on track tonight when they head to Ballybofey to face Finn Harps. That game gets underway at 8 o'clock. Also at 8 there's a Dublin derby at Dalymount as Bohemians host rivals Shelbourne. At 7:15 St Pat's entertain Cork City at Richmond Park, and Waterford welcome Derry City to the RSC. Elsewhere, Cabinteely can protect their 100% start in the First Division with a victory at home to Shamrock Rovers 2. UCD go to Drogheda, and Wexford play Galway. In golf, Rory McIlroy made a fine start in his defence of the Arnold Palmer Invitational in Florida on day 1. World #1 lies in second place at Bay Hill, just a shot behind leader Matt Avery following an opening round of 66. Graham McDowell sits on 4 under par, Porrick Harrington back on 2 over par, and McIlroy will get his second round underway at 5:45 this evening Irish time. He says, though, there is a straightforward key to this course.
So for Bay Hill, I think this course has always been about the par 5s. If you can play the par 5s well and play the rest of the course pretty conservatively and pick your spots. I mean, you're hitting irons off a lot of tees here, but if you can play the par 5s well, I mean, that's why Tiger's won here 7 or 8 times or whatever it is. He killed the par 5s. He then could pick and choose where he was going to be aggressive, and just sort of trying to follow that plan because it worked pretty well for him.
And racing this evening comes from Dundalk. Well, last night Gordon Elliott threw a spanner in the works in many an anti-post bet last night. He said the decision on where Envoy Allen will run will be made at the last minute and may run in the Supreme Novices Hurdle rather than the Ballymore, a race he's been favoured for all year long. So it was the anti-post market for the Supreme Novice Hurdle yesterday was bananas because 3 horses vied for favouritism over the course of the day. So the long-term favourite Shishkin, trained by Nicky Henderson, he actually drifted, and horse Willie Mullins took over favouritism before Gordon Elliott went on that preview panel last night and completely threw the cat among the pigeons. And sort of around this time yesterday, Envoy Allen would have been about 12-14 to 1 on Betfair, like the exchange price, which is probably the most accurate guide. And then he made that comment, and immediately he went into favourites in the space of sort of 7 hours, 3 different hoarded. He basically said it's been raining non-stop at Cheltenham apparently for the last week, and so the Supreme Novice Hurdle runs over 2 miles, whereas the Ballymore is over 2 miles and 5. So he thinks that just at this stage of Envoy Allen's career, it'd probably be better if the ground gets very, very soft, he'd rather take in 2 miles than 2 miles 5.
Are you already sort of ready for action? Is that
Yeah, and he
what was that hand signal?
In the traps. What's the thing in there? What's the
locked in
the box?
The runners are loaded. Yeah, I mean, any sort of anti-post bets have kind of been done. I have a few of them down. A few of them have kind of fallen by the wayside now in the last couple of weeks when the only way to get any value anti-post is to, you have to literally take a punt and guess on where a horse might go. So a few of those haven't kind of turned up. But as regards, I mean, if you're going to give someone betting advice on the Cheltenham Festival, just wait until the day. Bookmakers are falling over themselves to give you enhanced prices, offers, extra places. And unless you're after getting, ludicrous prices about things sort of a month or so ago, you're better off to wait until the day. Because like I say, it's a good time to be alive as a punter because they're getting too technical about it. The bookmakers will bet basically over broke on it. They just want to get people through the door. So if you sort of sit and have a look, they'll be betting to much tighter margins than they normally would on horse
Right.
racing, just because it's such a higher volume. So you should be able to take advantage.
Well, Tommy, we're going to be knee deep in our coverage next week.
Yeah, looking forward to that
but,
from 9 till 9:30 every week, every day next week.
Our daily Cheltenham show, all in association with Paddy Power as well. OTBAM on from the usual time of 7:30 all next week. But the show, that show will end at 9 o'clock, and we'll be straight in there to the Cheltenham show at that point. Thom and Dier are going to be chatting to John Duggan over the course, Paddy Power himself, Johnny Ward as well, all from Cheltenham each morning. So you can check all of that out over the course of the next week. Tom, thanks a million for that for the minute. We've got the top 5 stories next on OTBAM. First, before that, the Irish underage international footballer Rebecca McMahon, and this is a piece very much well worth checking out on offtheball.com in its entirety. But Rebecca joined Nathan alongside her dad Kieran last night in studio, who works closely with both Shamrock Rovers and Peamount United, and Rebecca discussed her early years playing competitive football.
No, there was no girls team in my local, around my area, so I joined an all-boys team.
How was that?
It was okay, it was pretty hard to kind of be picked for teams. Being the only girl was kind of hard because they probably, most teams didn't think I was going to be able to handle the boys, so... Yeah, being chosen was pretty hard.
So you were the only girl for a large part of it?
Yeah, a good few years. I was the only girl till I joined an all-girls team.
And would you have known many of the lads? Did you go to school with them?
My cousin kind of played, so I would have known him, and over time I kind of got to know the boys. I made friends with them. So
it's always a debate about youngsters and what age it should get serious and what age it should get competitive. Those first few years when you went in, was it very relaxed? Was it just everybody get together, have a bit of a kick around?
Yeah, it was all about kind of fun at that stage and kind of just improving your own skill, and it was all just a bit of fun at the start. Yeah.
And were the coaches happy to have you there?
Yeah, at the start they were, and then it kind of got more competitive, and then that's where it kind of started not being able to play, and always the boys were always picked kind of first because.
Right. What age were you about?
I was say around 9 or 10.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Think about it.
Yeah.
That there's people even being picked first at that age. That it's not just a natural thing where everybody's getting the same amount of game time. So would you have found when it came to games that the lads would get picked and you'd end up being left on the sideline?
I'd be lucky if I kind of got 10 or 15 minutes at a match. It would always be the boys first.
And this is only 5-6 years ago.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
For some reason I would have thought that because of the protocols that are put in place, the recommendations that are put in place, that it's all about just having a bit of fun, just getting out there.
You think that, but some teams...
Was it pretty demoralising?
Yeah, it was. Obviously, it's not great for your confidence, to be honest, not being played just because you're a girl,
You must have had something good within you that you kept going back, though.
Yeah,
had your burning desire to play?
Yeah, I love football, so I was never going to quit. I always wanted to do it.
Yeah, that was Rebecca McMahon and her dad, Kieran, on the show last night. The full piece up on offtheball.com. We can tell you as well that here at Off the Ball, we're delighted to be proud media partners of the 20x20 movement. We're asking everybody this week to show your stripes, make a pledge. You can either participate or play more. You can attend more women's sporting events. You can promote, discuss, share and follow more female athletes. Whatever pledge it is that you want to make, go and make it. I suppose this week is probably the message that we're trying to get out to you. You can find more at 20by20.ie or post your pledge online using the hashtag #ShowYourStripes. And to celebrate International Women's Day this week, we're giving away a 20by20 goodie bag each day across Off the Ball. Yesterday we asked you who scored Ireland's goal in their 1-1 draw with Greece last November. The answer was Amber Barrett, and the winner there is Kieran Kerrigan from Slane, who WhatsApped us his answer to 087 9180 180. To enter this morning, we're asking you who the Irish Rugby captain is for the 2020 season. You can tweet us your answer again, or you can hit us up on WhatsApp 087 9180 180, and you can see on the screen there just a moment ago some of the good goodies that you're going to be winging your way. You can head along to the 20by20.ie, by the way, to make some purchases, that good stuff as well, if you've missed out on our competition. It is 8:48 on this Friday morning. We're only getting around now. It's been such a busy morning to our top 5 picks of the morning. Lots going on here. Ronaldinho, not the most recognisable footballer in the world, it turns out, or at least by his own admission. I've an unusual story that's hard to sum out in a couple of words. We'll get into it. It's happening in Australian sport. Brexit and football is the homegrown player rule about to be tweaked. We'll let you know the very latest on that. The impact of coronavirus potentially on the Olympics, and the other story we have for you is in relation to Manchester United. So, Owen, do you want to kick us off with a bit of Ronaldinho?
Yeah, Ronaldinho. He's being held in Paraguay for using a fake passport. If you are a famous person, you do not use a fake passport is probably the number one golden rule of existence. If you are Adrian Barry or Owen Sheehan, we might be able to get away with using a fake passport because, frankly, nobody in Paraguay has a clue who we are. I suspect that if you are somebody who works in a Paraguayan airport or are a security official and you see Ronaldinho walk through the airport with a Paraguayan passport, your eyebrows might actually raise. And sure enough, he is being under investigation. This is the passport in question. We can see all his details there, of course, but he's not a Paraguayan citizen. When I saw this, it reminded me of one thing and one thing only. It was like McLovin. This is the only thing that reminds me of. It is fake as hell what Ronaldinho has used there. I will be able to suspect that something is probably up here. Ronaldinho McLovin tries to step into Paraguay, not arrested but under investigation. So in July 2019, the player reportedly had his Brazilian and Spanish passports confiscated over unpaid taxes and non-payment of fines for illegally building on a nature reserve. I didn't know this.
Ah, right. So
you build on a nature reserve, you've got your passport confiscated.
He built in Paraguay on a nature reserve. So that's why they're after him.
No, I'm not sure. So basically, a Paraguayan prosecutor said the pair left Sao Paulo with Brazilian passports and were given Paraguayan ones as soon as they got off the plane.
Yeah.
So this is.
So I'm assuming that. So he'd probably done this in Paraguay, right?
Yes.
So they're after him, and then he's gone in and gone, no, I'm not that guy. Oh, I'm this other guy. Look, my name is Ronaldo.
So apparently they said Ronaldinho and his brother's also.
No, but it said the passport. It says Ronaldo. Flip it up there again.
No, but that's.
What's that?
No, but that's his real name. That's his real name.
All right.
Ronaldinho is not his real name.
So he actually went in on his real name.
Well, no, what?
Mini Ronaldinho. I mean, it seems obvious now.
Ronaldo de Assis Moreira is his real name. Yeah. So that's his real name on the passport. Well, of course you're going to use your real name on the passport. Like, he would have obviously claimed that you're a Paraguayan. He has understood some of the point here that...
Sorry. My point would have been, if you change his name, if you're going to do it, go all in. Change your name entirely. And when the guy goes, no, you're Ronaldinho, you go, I'm not. Listen, people say that all the time. But if you're using your actual name, that's kind of stupid. Right?
Unless it's an actual forged document.
Which it is.
Allegedly. That...
Do you get my point? Like, let me use this analogy. Alan Shearer, right, is doing the same thing. He's been building in Ireland in a nature reserve that he shouldn't have built on, right? So he's travelling from England into Ireland now at this point. And part of that process, instead of making up a name like Frank O'Brien, let's say, and playing off that he's nothing to do with Alan Shearer, he, on his Irish passport, puts Alan Shearer, and they're like, no.
Or you can get a document and the border official is like, oh, fair enough, he's obviously got dual citizenship. That is what Ronaldinho is trying to do here. He says that himself and his brother got this passport as a gift. The officials say they've not gone through the process of obtaining Paraguayan nationality. To get Paraguayan nationality or to be naturalised as a Paraguayan, you have to have resided in the country, and I don't think Ronaldinho has ever done that. I don't agree with you. I think it would be stupid if you tried to put on another name and say, I'm... I don't know.
I think it's stupid to begin with. I'm just saying that might have lessened his chances of getting caught. Whatever happened to like getting a watch or like a bunch of flowers or a box of chocolates? Is this a new thing that I've missed out on? You give passports out as gifts.
Well, clear. I would. Would you take citizenship to another country instead of your Christmas gift?
Absolutely, yeah. Why not?
So would I. And I think if you're Ronaldinho, you've got all the riches in the world. You may as well get yourself a new passport.
Yeah.
Something money can't buy, or probably can't buy.
Definitely can. Right. Where are we going next? We've got the coronavirus. This is a story from the New York Times this morning, and an article here from Tariq Panja, Andrew Kay and Matthew Futterman in relation to the Tokyo Games, and it says here in the sub-headline that during a conference call with the World Health Organization last week, sports federations discussed holding the Tokyo Games without fans. So it seems like this is becoming a real possibility. It's something that's been discussed, obviously, at length over the while in relation to various sports. Serie A have gone down that route. Some indication this morning the Premier League might go down that route. Maybe the Six Nations is going that way. And so I suppose, in some respects, why not the Olympic Games is one thing. The only thing is that some of those other things, they're going to look a bit odd, right? Like the Serie A is going to look odd, Premier League will look odd if it goes that way, Six Nations is going to look a little bit odd. But it is different. I think the Olympics is just another step in terms of the experience that people who travel there get from it. And now all of that is suddenly just wiped.
So you're saying it would be less noticed if the Olympics was behind closed doors?
I think it's a far bigger thing. Yeah, the Olympics is behind closed doors than a Premier League game.
Well, at the same time, if you compare the percentage of people who are watching Olympics on television rather than actually being there compared to a football match, it's a far smaller percentage of people that are actually at the Olympics. It's a television event. It's a global television event. The supporters that are there are largely families, friends of the athletes, and people who live in that part of the world who might jet up and actually see it. Like, I think, for example, if we're comparing two sporting events in Japan, and you're an Irish sports fan who likes everything equally, you probably will be more likely to make the trip to the World Cup last year than you will be to make the trip to the Olympics, because it's not a supporters thing. Like, how much are you going to notice the difference if you're sitting at home on your television and the aquatic centre isn't full of people?
Well, that said, I presume that all the venues would have been sold out.
I presume so too, but like, that's just refunds.
Yeah. I don't mean that. I just mean in terms of it would still have been fully populated with fans of whatever creed they would have been. It'll be unusual to look at.
Oh yeah, sorry. Like, there's no question about it. Like, the opening ceremony, the big athletics events in the stadium, and to be honest with you, when I mentioned the aquatic centre there, that's actually a terrible example because it's probably the noisiest arena and all the echo there. But if you take all the niche events, like from the judo to the archery, it's not, you don't never notice the spectators there. It's only in the stadium and the aquatic centre where these sort of things will be noticed hugely. I think it's a live possibility to put them behind closed doors, but I really think from the sounds we're getting this week, it's going to be pushed back as far as possible.
Doesn't look great, does it? A story from the Herald Sun in Australia this morning as well. Trolling forces newspaper to end women's Australian rules comments. This is a story that's published here. An Australian newspaper says sexist remarks have forced it to remove the comments section from its coverage of women's Australian rules football. This is a desperately depressing story, it has to be said. One story received almost 300 comments of a sexist tone. It said abusive comments aimed at players have plagued the sport for months. Women began playing the sport professionally. Obviously, several Irish players have gone over there over the last little while. Began playing it professionally in 2017. Cowardly grubs is how they've been referred to by the Prime Minister Scott Morrison after their attack on one player specifically. There was one line that stood out for me from this own day. The newspaper's head of sport had said that players, commentators, fans and clubs had all appealed to the newspaper to shut off the comments, and we've heard them. And it's in the face of that, maybe that's the action you take. One option would have been, obviously, and it seems like there are many of them, so you'd probably have to have one person dedicated to this, but like calling these people out, obviously, publicly would have been another option. So I don't know what the various platforms you go on. You can go onto YouTube and call yourself whatever and leave whatever comment you do, as people do, whereas on Facebook, obviously, it's highly attributable back to an individual. If they could do something like that and then use that information to call those people out, that would probably be a fast track to ending it.
Yeah, and I think Tallaght Harris has said that she would give up some of her wages to actually monitor this. Public bullying is a ripple effect to young people, and she says that the governing body needs to be better in this space. I'll tell you why this sport is being targeted more than any other female sport around the world, and why this has been a big story, is that the women's AFL has been a huge success. That there are people who will comment on these boards and are actually fuming by the very notion that there are women successful in a professional sport in the AFL. This has only been formed in 2017. They've got sellout crowds, huge television audiences. A sports-mad nation of Australia has embraced the new women's professional league. And there are some sad, vile individuals who feel really uncomfortable about this. And that is why we are seeing a huge number of comments in these sections. And it's the same around the world, but the volume on these articles is much higher, and they've had to take this step.
That the homegrown players rule, the discussions are ongoing, obviously, post-Brexit. They're only going to allow 5 clubs be represented in the conversation about how this should look now after Brexit. And they're going to try and obviously represent as many levels of the clubs in the Premier League as they can, as opposed to just bringing in the big 5 or whatever it might be. So they're going to try and have somebody from the various different levels across the division. As it stands, a homegrown player is one who, irrespective of nationality or age, has been with an English or Welsh academy for 3 seasons or 36 months prior to his 21st birthday. But Brexit could have major consequences for the definition of a homegrown player. So they're obviously going to go in and, like, if something like that had to come out in the lead into the Brexit vote, something like that could have actually been the grain of rice.
Well, there was a grain of rice, obviously, that decided in the end, wasn't it? So it's it could have been. I'm not sure about that, but they're going to loophole the shit out of this whole thing to ensure that football doesn't get affected by what's going to come down the line over the next few months. And obviously, Irish young footballers are in the firing line. I personally see that there's a possible benefit to all of this, that there is a huge swathe of Irish youngsters who are making the step over to England just way too soon. Now, football clubs in England will get around that by moving families over to the UK rather than just moving a young footballer over to the UK. But I think there's always a possibility here. Stay, play League of Ireland until your late teens and see where you're at from there. It'll probably be better for your off-the-pitch life and may actually benefit you on the pitch as well.
Yeah. All right, there's lots coming on off the ball over the course of the next couple of days, and on your radio tonight from 7 o'clock as well. The Mayo footballer Stephen Cohen on a disappointing league, the changes to the GAA and Championship hopes as well. Friday night racing with Mikey Kiley, the S&C coach with Limerick Hurlers, and also works with jockeys as well. Should be an interesting watch. Kenny Cunningham and Stephen Hunt on their wild days out at Cheltenham during their career. They were at our Paddy Power show at the Camden during the week. Team 33 from 9 o'clock, Enda Colin Buhig. They're going to bring you all the very latest there. Saturday, the Saturday panel from 1 o'clock. John is going to be joined by Conor O'Dwyer and football right through until 5 o'clock off the ball live as well on Sunday from 1 o'clock to 7, where there's the Sunday pay-per-view with Joe, as well as 2 live Premier League games that we mentioned a bit earlier on. That Manchester derby in the company of Stephen and Brian Kerr, and Chelsea up against Everton as well with Nathan and Gary Breen. So if you missed anything this morning, you'll find the OTB AM podcast. It's on YouTube, and you can cast your show there to your smart TV if you're that way inclined. Subscribe to the OTB AM podcast, fully time-stamped, which will make it easy for you to find exactly what you want from every morning's 2-hour show. OTB AM, Ireland's first and only sports breakfast show, and we're here every morning from 7:30. The lads will be with you again from 7:30 on Monday morning to pick through everything. Enjoy your weekend, Owen.
You too. Take care.
We're not going just yet, though. Myself and Owen are off to change clothes and swap seats and invite a couple of guests into studio. We're going to look back in the very latest episode of the Classic Game Club, where we're looking at the iconic France-Ireland Six Nations game in Paris from the 2000 Championship. Enjoy.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
The Paddy Power Half Hour, exclusive to OTB Sports Radio.
And I know the ball into him wasn't great, but he was getting the ball in his chest, and the touch was taking him 5 yards back into the centre of midfield where the pressure was. So it was doing the opposite of what we need as a number 10, and Jack Byrne offers that. But again, it is a big step up to international football.
A 30-minute no-nonsense preview of the weekend's Premier League action.
I think they'll do well in the Champions League. They'll get to the knockout stages, and if they get a kind of B-level team, not one of the really big guns, they could get to a quarter-final, and you never know.
The Paddy Power Half Hour, every Friday from 12 midday, only on OTB Sports Radio, live 24/7 on the Go Loud app.
OTB AM.
But don't start drinking the stout yet. Anything could happen in a minute or so of play. But it is only that sort of time we're talking about. The ball into touch, but it's not the final whistle. Yes, it is! Yes! Stringer, arms aloft. Ireland have done it at last. They've won in Paris for the first time since Tom Kiernan was captain at the old Stade Colombe in 1972. A first ever win over France since 1983. Let the celebrations begin. It was a win of courage, not of great inspiration, although one has to say that man, Brian O'Driscoll, will be the toast of the whole of Ireland tonight. His hat-trick of tries, and finally the important penalty of David Humphreys that sealed the win they've so long awaited. 3 wins in a row in the Championship for the first time since 1982, and there the man is hoisted aloft.
Yeah, 20 years ago this month, it is France against Ireland in the 2000 Six Nations. Brian O'Driscoll's hat-trick, possibly the most famous hat-trick ever scored in Irish rugby. You're very welcome along to the Classic Game Club. This is where we go back and watch epic matches. It's like a book club, except for classic games. We've got Adrian Barry, Jerry Gilroy, Neil Tracy, all here. How are you, lads?
Good, yeah.
For each and every one of you, I presume this is a nostalgic moment watching this back?
I can't specifically remember where I was at that exact moment, I have to say. But
why blurry sort of
blurry
memories,
times,
or
blurry times.
being
I was just back from Australia. I'll give you a very brief angle. I'll try and keep it as brief as I
Did
can.
you go to Australia? I never knew that.
Yeah,
I
don't try to talk about it that much. I'd been in Australia for most of 1999. Ireland were on a summer tour down there. At some point, they were not good. They were not good on that tour at all. In fact, I think they might have lost every single game they played. But one of the games they played was against New South Wales, obviously provincial team down there at the Sydney Football Stadium, which myself and the group of people I was with went to. From recollection, it would have been sort of an early enough kind of a game. Anyway, obviously, we were there on a year out And needless to say, a few beers were had at the game and every other way. And Ireland were awful.
And you tweeted possibly the greatest team of all time.
Yeah. And whenever Twitter was in 1999. So anyway, later on that day, anybody's been to Sydney, be familiar with Scruffy Murphy's. It's like the Coppers of Sydney, effectively. And we went down there and continued to indulge. As the night wore on, the Irish team obviously got wind this is a place to go and came on over. So I, at some point or another, had lost all sort of reasonableness and sensibility and ended up in a conversation with two of the biggest and most fearsome Irish rugby players of all time, Victor Costello initially. And obviously I had had a few drinks in me and proceeded to tell him how shite they were that day. And I wasn't personalising it, I was just saying, God, you were all shit today. That was it in its essence, yeah. So he, as we stood chatting, Trevor Brennan was sort of standing there with his back to him and he went, Trev, this lad here said you were shit today. And at that point I went, great to meet you lads. I'm out of here. And I went downstairs and there was this one I'll leave unnamed, Irish player going on. They all had their blazers on them, obviously. At that point they would go out with the blazers on them, and he had his jacket pocket of his blazer jammed. You couldn't have squeezed another cigarette in there.
Wow, okay.
And was enjoying himself.
Probably take an educated guess to do that.
Yeah, I think it was a fair idea.
Where were you for this? Where were you?
No recollection. No. Don't
I've no need for that stuff at all.
Just watching it on TV. I wasn't at the game or anything. So.
Right. Where were you?
I only remember seeing bits and pieces of it. I vaguely remember being at my aunt's house watching some of it.
Okay.
And then I was getting dropped off to my friend's house and missed all the good part of the game.
All right.
And then
which was the last 20 minutes essentially, is that the...
Oh no, I'd say it was probably from about end of the first half I left, and by the time I got over...
When was it?
It was
March 2000.
Match was over and I was being told, oh my God, Ireland won. And I was like,
what?
It was a Sunday game as well. That kind of struck me, that they were saying it's the first ever Sunday.
It was the first Sunday international in Paris or something.
Yeah, because they had Arsenal Spurs scores at the bottom, and we watched it on a BBC version on YouTube, which you can watch at home as well if you want to watch it back before watching this. And they were saying that the games were staggered that day, so in my head I was like, there must be a Sunday game. I've got no recollection of this happening, but what I do have a recollection of is the 2003 World Cup and having this weird sense of arrogance before the World Cup quarter-final, being like, France? We're obviously going to be France. World Cup quarter-final against these boys. Sure, I remember us beating them over the last few years. Now, I seem to have completely blanked out 2002 from my mind when they beat us by 39 points. But I just figured this must have been somewhere in my thinking. Brian O'Driscoll darting around French players must have helped my sense of arrogance.
What age would you have been at that point?
For this game?
For 2000?
For 2006, 5-6.
Oh, right, okay.
So, it would have been ridiculous had I actually remembered who was playing. Just to give the context for this game, not that your kind of monologue from Australia doesn't give enough context, but 1999 also had at the Rugby World Cup and Lon's defeat to Argentina and stuff, so that sets up the new century. Kind of like this particular decade as well, setting us up with an air of doom and gloom, and then they started the Six Nations off terribly actually in 2000. If you don't remember, we were beaten 50-18 by England in Twickenham, but they'd come back with wins against Scotland and Italy, and then it's off to Paris. So as you kind of heard in the commentary there, hadn't beaten France for 17 years, hadn't won in Paris since 1972. But a new generation of players coming along. Just to go through the Ireland team that day before we get into things, the back three was Gervin Dempsey, Kevin Maggs, Dennis Hickey. The centres were Brian O'Driscoll and Rob Henderson. It was Stringer and O'Gara at half-back. The front row of Clohessy, Wood, Hayes. Second row of Galway and Mallow Kelly. Then a back row of Simon Easterby, Kieran Dawson and Anthony Foley. Was there... I wonder, in terms of the context of this game as well, Munster is mentioned quite a bit, and it was the Toulouse game shortly before that people were like, all right, Irish rugby is...
No, Toulouse would have been shortly after.
Oh, okay, right.
No, it would have been Saracens.
So Northampton the previous year in...
No, that was later that year.
Oh, right,
2000 was Munster's first one. So they would have got through their pool stage. It would have been a few weeks, I'd say, after the Saracens game.
Okay.
When O'Gara had made the last second conversion to win, and George Hook had written them off at half time as he always did, and it was like the Munster thing was just starting. So
the stocks for Roger were pretty high already before this.
So hang on, Ulster had won the previous year and the English teams hadn't played in 99, is that right?
Yeah.
And 2000 then it looks like there's another Irish team going well.
Yeah.
Okay, and they reached the final. Okay.
Watching this game back, it's absolute chaos. It's unbelievable.
It's a different sport.
The head coach is Warren Gatland, who has black hair, and sitting beside him is Eddie O'Sullivan, who clearly already is thinking, this gig's mine, lads. This gig is my gig. You can tell because at the end of it, Jiffy, who looks very young, is like...
Incredibly young.
I went down to the press conference and Gatland wouldn't speak. He wouldn't answer questions after the England game.
I thought he was saying that he wasn't asked questions. I couldn't make any sense of it at all.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out what he meant.
And it was like the other. Go on.
He's probably got himself a new contract now. Was the line?
Yeah.
Well, you think that?
Reader, he didn't.
The other, like the big, like the 2006 Nations is obviously known for that, but the other big thing being the post that England defeat and the turnaround of players after that. Like it was Stringer and Rogers' third cap, something like that. Like
Easterby third cap.
Shane Horgan, I think, was thrown in around that time. Was
it
was one of the biggest pivotal moments
which was mad.
Yeah.
of a change in Irish rugby at that time. Where, like, looking at some point or another, I looked at the Irish team that had played France 12 months earlier, and like a lot of the names that were in it, like Diane Quinnigan, Eric Miller. There was
at the end of a
of
World Cup cycle, they decided those players had changed to the point where they needed new blood.
What is it about that?
It's very unusual, isn't it? 20 years later, it's like we're having the exact same conversation. So let's just get back to the start of this match. We will get into the Warren Gatland thing soon because we will hear that clip from Jiffy. But I just couldn't believe what we're watching here. Like, first of all, I had this complete illusion in my head that Ireland, for some reason, won this game by more than they did. I just didn't realise the game actually went down as late as it eventually did. I didn't realise how unbelievably good France were. Like, from the start, they killed Ireland. I don't know how they weren't 14, 21 points up.
The first 50 seconds, amazing.
But what I did love, right at the very, very start of the video on YouTube, John Inverdale is getting the prediction from the lads, and 20 years have gone by, but the line from Jiffy was, I think France should win, but you'd never know. Yeah. Like, it's just complete France.
Same
it's the exact same story with France all over again.
Yeah,
but they were just off the back of a World Cup final.
What did you say there about France? That they were so good that they
liquid rugby.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, look, it's fair enough.
Ireland.
I mean, in the entire game, they could have 3 or 4 tries that could have, actually, I thought at some point, if TMO had been in, like that first try might have actually been given,
it's definitely
but you know the momentum. Yeah. Actually, sorry, one thing about this entire thing was, and obviously we were watching the BBC commentary, it would have been interesting to have seen the RT one, but the madness of the TV coverage of it. Like,
they were missing everything.
The wide angle was being filmed from like Berlin Main Street. Yeah. Like there was nothing you could see. It was.
So obviously, Stade de France hosts the World Cup in '98, and that's its first unveiling properly. Yeah. But had it been hosting, it had obviously.
It was 5 years. It was 5 years old.
I'm almost certain they said that it was like Ireland's second visit, maybe, or something like that.
There's been a football international.
They've been around for a year or two anyway. In terms of internationals.
Like the wide angle, you couldn't see anything. They missed a try. They missed a conversion. You got like next to no replays.
The entire production conversion, not enough replays. That was actually one of the times where they were finally shot it. And when they did get replays that worked, they were like, "We're going to show that again and again." Yeah. Keith Wood getting absolutely emptied by.
It was unbelievable tackle.
It was just an explosion, and they were like, "We've got 15 angles on that. We're going to show you them now for the next 10 minutes."
Also, as well, this is like an artefact of how detrimental global warming has been to our entire planet, because I don't remember ever seeing a Six Nations game as sunny and as sun-baked as that afternoon in Paris.
The try in 47 seconds, I don't know, and we'll never know because we'll never see the angles on it. But and there are different rules now. But like the forward momentum of the pass, right? You know that I passed the ball back, but it went forward, sort of thing. But I know it wasn't at that time. But what I'm saying to you is, like, if you applied today's rules and today's coverage on that try, it could well have been given. And if it had, by the way, I think that. Like, we'll get into pivotal moments and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, we might get into that now. Yeah. Because, like, we can easily go through O'Driscoll's hat-trick and things like that. Has anybody gone for a moment outside of that as moment of the match? I certainly have.
I deliberately did, because it was like...
Delzicky on Del Mazo.
It's like one of the most defining moments in that team and his career. It's like an astounding piece of skill. Now, absolutely correctly pointed out, which you can notice at the time, is that the referee is our best defender in that whole thing. So the hooker, for anybody who doesn't know what we're talking about, there's an amazing piece of skill from Emile Ntamak. There's a Gary Owen which goes a bit deep from Ronan O'Gara, which goes into the French 22, and instead of like catching it and taking the mark and kicking it into touch, which is, you know what, maybe Gervin Dempsey might have done, Emile Ntamak is like, right, here we go, and the whole crowd is suddenly, Ntamak's running, something's going to happen, size through, bit of interplay with like the fat lads who aren't supposed to be able to pass the ball, and all of a sudden the hooker's sprinting through, and he looks over and there's a defender to his left. He's like, oh, I'm going to slow down here. He's like, oh shit, it's the referee, not a defender. I'm going to slow down. And Dennis Hickey makes this mad run out the outside.
He came from nowhere as well, like seriously came from
when you look at it,
the depths of hell, I think he came from.
When you watch it on the replay, you're like, well, so it couldn't have been Hickey that got to him now. Who was it?
Yeah.
He's that far away.
But
he did himself a bit of damage in the process. He had to go off afterwards for
a blood
injury.
Playing that though.
Well,
does Delmazo still get the arm away?
He still gets the dry if O'Driscoll doesn't get in there and rips it at the last second. But I mean, for Dennis Hickey to have come around and actually made that tackle in and of itself,
and that was game over.
Because it was 19-7 and it was 47 minutes on the clock. They were going to hockey us. That was like a stereotypical. It was going to be another 50-point defeat. Like that would have just broken the spirit of the team.
Instead, they just get caught up looking at the referee for O'Driscoll's third try, and they get confused by what tends to happen. They go full French at certain points after this.
Instead, I think like Hickey goes off for 10 minutes and comes back. Whatever was in the magic sponge that Hickey got.
Yeah, because I was trying to think of the the alternative man of the match, and for a large part of the match I was kind of run through a couple of names going maybe, and then Hickey comes back on after getting
hands.
His head strapped
I think it wasn't so much and it might have been the break might have fed into it a little bit, but I think it was also at some point or another Ireland realised this game was getting away from them, and what they did was, like, I couldn't believe early in the commentary, Philip Matthews kept saying, "Oh,
keep the ball in hands.
Why do Ireland keep kicking it?" And I was like, "No, this is the right thing to do." At the rewatching, no, it's the right thing to do. Kick it in behind, like Rog had. I was counting them out, sort of 10 or 12 kicks in behind, and it was like, Quinny goes on about it now as something we should be doing much more often. But watching, I was like, no, it's the right thing to do. Put them on the back foot and go for it. Once they started getting the ball in hand and running at France, they didn't know how to cope with them. It was like, Jesus, no matter who it was, Henderson, Hickey
was so smart,
Rog,
though, that he found a mismatch and made 60 yards of it. He's like, okay, I got you. Ran outside a guy and passed him in the same way that he did for the try-saving tackle.
Was this peak Dennis Hickey?
No, I think a few years later would have been.
Well, he had hair, if that's what you mean. Is that what you're talking about? Sort of.
There's a game against Australia.
Was this pre or post Waven Pipe pad?
It would have been pre.
There's a game against Australia, I remember, he was absolutely sensational as well. I think, so this is pre his...
I'd say early, like kind of 2003-4ish.
Dennis Hickey had so many years being... an unbelievable rugby player as well. It wasn't
it's
like
ridiculous
he was a
that player didn't make the next Lions tour as well, which is only a year away. And we've got the Lions centre partnership for the first test in playing for Ireland. Henderson was also very good, and
excellent.
Much more deft than you would have given him credit for. Like his Munster
he probably had to be the role of Brian O'Driscoll's straight guy, like.
Since you've gone for Dennis Hickey's tackle as your moment of the match, which in fairness I did as well.
I went for another one.
I've got it back up as well. You go first.
It wasn't so much like pivotal moment. It was just a particular moment that I just found absolutely baffling and hilarious. So 34 minutes in, Ireland were attacking in the 22. They got an overlap on the right side of the pitch, and they got it out to Kieran Dawson as the last man who dives for the line.
Oh yeah.
And he just had his head taken off by Fabian Palouse. Like, high tackle around the neck, just yoinked him by the head essentially, and Dawson spilled the ball as he was diving over. But the reaction was like, Philip Matthews on commentary was like, "That's a great tackle by Palouse. That's an absolutely brilliant tackle."
High tackles were.
It was like today it is a guaranteed penalty try and yellow card.
He tried to pull his head out of his socket.
Yeah,
essentially.
They were talking about it at half time as well, talking about how great the tackle was.
Earlier in the game, also one of the French players was literally had his head in his arm and was physically trying to pull it out of his socket.
Big Mal, was sensational in this game. Like, he was another candidate for alternative man of the match. Clearly Brian O'Driscoll man of the match, 3 tries, absolutely sensational.
As well the
what an amazing pass for O'Driscoll's try, which I hadn't seen.
Big Mal.
Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. It's left hands.
Two hands, but delayed, because it looks like...
Was he a righty or lefty as well, because he was passing left?
It looks like Keith Wood is the obvious one, and it is the obvious one. The ball's kind of... It's not quite at the line, but we're maybe 5 metres out from the line, and there's a ruck formed, and I don't know how Big Mal ends up with the ball, but he does anyway. And he looks up and fixes the defenders, and then skips Keith Wood straight to Brian O'Driscoll, who's like, straight through. Thanks very much.
And that's why I have not gone for Dennis Hickey as my alternative man of the match. But we'll come back to that in a moment, just because we need to just clarify that Fabian Palouse on Keith Wood right before half time is actually up there as one of the moments of the match. Like, that is, when you talk about moments,
it was an unbelievable tackle.
And he's interviewed at half time as well. We don't actually get the audio, unfortunately.
Palouse is?
Yeah.
Yes, and he's on his knee at half time.
Right.
Yeah, it's unreal.
And he looks like a villain from an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie at half time. It's like, that guy, imagine like getting crumpled up by that man. And I think even mid tackle, Keith Wood was like, this can't happen to me. I'm Keith Woods.
But the mad thing about it was, like, the technique and everything was so wrong. He'd, like, his head over on the wrong side.
He was on one leg going forward.
He did everything wrong, but absolutely.
Who did O'Driscoll
cost Keith Wood in two?
It was. I have this down somewhere.
I took it down as well.
It's just a
Bernasal. Yeah.
And that's a high hit.
Whoa, what a tackle.
Like he gets a bit ahead of that.
High hits
well, he's down for about a minute afterwards, kind of. I'm fine, it's fine. It was early on. It was before he scored.
The amount of times he was down getting attention. Like, post most of the tries, he was down.
I did notice first half he was flinging himself into tackles.
Yeah.
Like, absolutely.
The pre-match, I didn't actually watch all the pre-match now, but at half-time they were like, pre-match we were talking about the deficiencies in his defence.
Like,
really? Were you?
Yeah, they were saying the jury's out or something. The jury was outing him defensively or something like that.
That was Jiffy Davis taking that. We might actually hear from the panel on Brian O'Driscoll, because he's obviously the man of the match, and they waxed lyrical about O'Driscoll at full time on the BBC.
Brian O'Driscoll, an absolute legend. The kid, he'll have the key to the country, not the city. It was a brilliant.
He had a fantastic game.
When it wasn't just his attacking, he was everywhere. He was making tackles. He was picking in the forwards. He was absolutely everywhere, and fully deserved his hat-trick today. Brilliant.
Yeah, he was brilliant. Pace he shows, even when he takes short passes, just trying to get over the advantage line all the time, and
he's got great hands as well.
Yes, and there were question marks over there. He is. There were question marks over his defence, but his hits today, I think that's what won them the game. Their defence was awesome. When they were under pressure. At the start of the first half, start of the second half, they just kept them out, and when the opportunities came, they scored them.
We actually did a feature with Dennis Hickey before the game began, and his tackle on Del Mazo in the first sort of 30 seconds of the second half, you could actually say it was a turning point, because if France had scored early in the second half, that might have been it, mightn't it?
There's also a bit at half-time on BBC where Matt Dawson's like, he's doing that weird celebration thing that nobody knows what's going on.
Yeah.
But obviously, for anybody who doesn't know, this was the big O, the celebration he did. So it was a friend of O'Driscoll's sister, Thom Malone, who was fond of being referred to as the Big O. So in Buck Whaley's one night, O'Driscoll was urged by the man himself to give a big shout out to the Big O next time he scored a try for Ireland. And apparently Oran tried to tell this to all his friends for years and years afterwards, and nobody believes him that actually it was a shout out from Brian O'Driscoll, until O'Driscoll actually revealed it in his book a few years later. So that's what he was doing, Matt Dawson. So he's obviously man of the match. Secret man of the match for me, Malcolm O'Kelly.
Before we do that, can I just say, the lads in the studio, like, what was going on? The whole thing was so weird. It was like, they clearly hadn't, but it was like as if they were having a couple of beers under the table. John Inverdale was wearing his ma's blouse. Like, the whole thing was so weird. It was like this little in-joke that wasn't really that funny. It was like they were... Kevin Cabal might say if they were chocolate, they'd eat themselves. It was...
What I loved as well on the BBC set, they had behind Inverdale the shot of like all the people working in the background. But I'd say in 2000, people were like, "Oh, that is class.
Why? It was
that is unbelievable."
I didn't understand that.
I'd say people were like, "Oh, that is one of the coolest things."
But they still do that in well, actually maybe they've moved away from it now. But
it was like an office shot of it, I don't know. But it was, I found the whole thing just so weird, and it was like all these little in gags that somebody would say something that seemed quite innocuous, but then the other ones would be having a little grin about it. Like, it was like, "Oh yeah, what's happening here?"
Yeah,
I found the whole analysis of it bad and weird.
I couldn't quite tell if Matt Dawson despises John Inverdale or actually kind of respects him.
I think there was the matiness was like dripping off the whole production. I thought, we are mates. They should have put up a little thing in the thing saying
it says it's as good as the game. But Malcolm O'Kelly, has anybody else got on this ship with me, or are you all...
He was very good, yeah, he was.
But are you on Dennis Hickey as the official
I would put Dennis Hickey,
yeah, Hickey was sensational.
Yeah.
Like,
I was considering Kieran Dawson as well, but he was off after about 55 minutes. But he played unbelievable.
Stringer, by the way, Stringer deserves a shout.
Pass, wow.
Stringer deserves a shout for his pass. Like, I was actually looking at, because again, the box kicking conversation that we have constantly now, he box kicked 3 times during the game. Not always to great effect, by the way, but the whip of his pass, like... When you talk about peak players, I mean, to be fair, he carried that out for another 10 years afterwards. But,
20. He was still doing it last week.
The pass was unbelievable.
Sensational.
I would say that in the first half, certainly France's best attacking platform was the Irish line-out.
And Ireland's best was France's lineup.
So there was definitely, I don't know what role Malcolm O'Kelly played in that or how much it was down to Woody, but certainly in the second half, the old school French hooker throwing
one-handed.
And even when they were playing something, come on, he was at the same crack.
But it was the throw was so slow.
Using two hands, no?
No, I thought it was. I'm pretty sure it was.
No, you see, I think it was. You're probably still only about 5 years on from professionalism, and it's probably only around 5-6 years since they would have been lifting in lineouts. So
lifting wasn't great. They didn't really know how to do it.
Yeah, but it was all just really slow. But I think that the one-handed throw was what a lot of people would have done back in the days when there was no lift.
Yeah.
And I think that was around a time when I'd say there probably was just a lingering group of players that were reluctant.
Well, the French would have been like,
because there's no pace. Like there's no pace on a one-handed throw whatsoever,
or anything.
It's just floated up there. Like.
Well, I'll give it to Mal because he's blowing after 30 minutes. He's like basically on all fours. He's like, I am screwed here. Get me off, and then he ends up throwing offloads and is one of the key players for the rest of the game.
I want to preface my comments with. I think I might be the country's greatest Big Mal fan of all time. I think he was done out of about 70 or 80 caps for Ireland.
He has about 90.
And still done out of about 70 or 80. But I don't think that was his finest performance. I was watching him at times. The hands for the try were unbelievable. But by and large, when you look at Big Mal, he's trying to look as if he's busy without actually doing anything. He's hanging around the edges of rucks. He's like sort of hand on his hips, hand on one of the French lads, like sort of leaning and propping himself up.
I think there's definitely a whole team of them are
avoiding work.
That was rugby back then, though, wasn't it?
Like people at the ruck didn't have. There was no pillar. There was no organisation around that. There was no. It was like. Bunch of lads run in, get off your feet, try not to get penalised, don't be too obvious about it. Paddy John's getting yellow carded.
There was nothing subtle about that.
The rules have changed a bit, Paddy, but not so much that you can do that.
Paddy John comes around the side of a ruck for anybody who hasn't seen it and just completely takes the scrum half out of it. Like,
and you know, one of the funniest things about that entire thing was, so he comes around about 10 seconds before he should have done, cleans the scrum half out of it, and still the scrum half is lying on the ground on his back looking up at the referee going for about 5 seconds going,
are you gonna do something here?
He's gonna give me anything.
Commentary thought it was harsh, Paddy John's yellow card.
I thought it was harsh because there hadn't been, it was obviously he's just on, he literally kind of on his replacement, I'd say less than 10 minutes, and so it was harsh on him. There wasn't persistence. Like that was Ireland's second row, Philip Matthews from Ulster saying, my buddy, probably with Nigel Starmer-Smith. 92 caps for Ireland, Malcolm O'Kelly had. So I don't know how
another 60 or 70, Jerry, you know yourself. By the way, when we talk about like moments of the game, I would have had the Paddy Johns being absolutely 100% blatantly and rightly yellow carded for that. The yellow card was only in 3 months, by the way, at that point. It was like a brand new thing that people... But I think, for me, it's 10 minutes, but a moment of the game was, it was 3-3. The scoreline when he was off the pitch was 3-3. Like in a game as chaotic as that, where like it wasn't as if like the game plan A, B, C, D, and E was bash them up the middle, suck in a few players, and then go for it. Like there wasn't this like 7 or 8 phases to sweep them across the pitch and then dummy them over this way and swing back the other way. Like in a game that was so chaotic, a player being off the pitch you would have thought was actually tantamount to 21 points for the other side.
Except they couldn't organise enough. That was
3-3 when he was off the pitch, I thought was actually...
Just mentioning the 3-3 bit, like, one thing, I think we've done David Humphreys a bit of an injustice by not mentioning the fact that he actually had to make a pretty difficult penalty to win the match in the final couple of minutes. Like, you know, the try gets Ireland back to within, 1 or 2?
Well, level scores according to Nigel Starmer-Smith.
By the way, were they at the game? They weren't at the game.
I don't know.
Because there was a few times I noticed they were talking about something. There was like a substitute happening, and they'd called a substitution, but it was actually just a player walking over to a ruck.
No, I think
I think they were at the game.
I'm almost certain they called the try that the camera missed.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
So I think they probably would have been.
And they were.
I'm almost certain they got that. When you're watching the replay, you know a try's been
and you
scored.
missed the conversion was the other one as well.
The one they missed is Brian O'Driscoll's third, when Emil Ntamack just stops running because the teammates are all looking at the ref.
I think Emil Ntamack knows that O'Driscoll's like that's the thing that separated him from other players of his ability were like acceleration in a tiny space.
Yeah, true, I guess.
And angle and lines of running and footwork. Like all of that was on display.
I still felt that Ntamack should have dived for him at the very least.
French fullbacks don't dive for players.
Really
Come on.
This was laid bare on this particular Sunday afternoon. Is there something you wanted to say there before we get into
the scrums?
Oh yeah,
the scrums are amazing. They're so violent, and it's just
the gap between the two before it's like about 1.5 meter gap,
and then the referee just jumps out of the way.
Each other.
Yeah,
and they go at it straight away.
Yeah,
and like. Do you know those there's footage from 1970s crowd scenes at football matches where a goal is scored and everybody surges one way and they surge back? It's sensational and so violent. And like, how did you ever referee any of that stuff?
And a lottery. And by the way, well, I think at times looking at that game, like I wouldn't know the first thing about the scrum, and feel free to come in here now on this, but like you would look at scrums and you would go, well, France have murdered us there, and the referee would go, penalty Ireland, and even you could see some of the Irish like Hayes and Woody going,
yeah, shut up, lads.
I can't believe that's just happened, but like,
of course it was. They were so chaotic back then, like it's impossible. Like it actually was really, really difficult to even read it. Nowadays you can kind of.
There wasn't that many of them either.
There's such a methodical setup. You can kind of see a few things.
No subs. Like no front row sub everybody getting in and getting off.
Subs back then was like if someone was injured. Even 2009, I remember when we did it was the Ireland Wales game. I think both teams had their starting props on the pitch
at the end
at full time. That was 2009.
The idea of the finishers was like
that's only like
embryonic.
Something the last 10 years or so.
Let's get into some of the trends that we've seen. Like I've got a list of most jarring here, which comes after trends, and that list is 10 times as long as this trending.
My most jarring and trending are kind of the same kind of thing.
But then let's just throw them all in together. For me, trending, the refs' jerseys class. And I think that's
the jerseys
in general.
The collars.
They were cat. The jerseys were cat. They were baggy. They must have weighed about a ton, by the way.
I'd say
baggy and shoulder pads. Heavy. But the collars were cool.
They eventually did away with them a few years later when it was like, was it the Heineken Cup, one of those where there was like players were like, there was a lot of players dragging on to lads as they were going towards the line and like being able to hold them down by the jersey. Do you remember then Wales went like were basically wearing paper at some point?
Yeah.
To the point where the jerseys, which they probably loved.
I remember on the jerseys, like there was one point in the second half where Ireland had a scrum and you could see Peter Clossy getting his bind on Keith Wood, and normally like you just grab a bit of jersey because they're tight now, like you're grabbing any bit of jersey you can. Clossy had his arm and like wrapped it. He had done this kind of loop around Wood's jersey so that there was like, if he was to lose his bind, it was because his wrist was going to break.
But it was England that came along and changed it all, wasn't it?
England and France had the skin. Nike, really. Nike did it. 2003.
Even seeing O'Driscoll run with the baggy jersey is just better than anybody with it. Yeah. Like it's just why this is actually not helping his aerodynamics whatsoever, and yet
he can still do it. Yeah,
he can still do it.
Can I the some of the trends, the opposition's body language when the other team scored. You know the way now it's like all very positive and right, let's realign and let's get back to it.
Drudging in under the
slumps. It was like, oh shit. Like lying on the ground, like it was like picked up by like Mick Galway's shorts definitely deserve a tip of the cap.
I missed this, but
like I'd forgotten about it, but it wasn't just from that game, just in general. He used to wear his shorts up around his nipples. He was a Simon Cowell of rugby. No discipline I had was another one. Like there was just
Ireland gave away like 6 penalties in that quarter of an hour. It was just like any time France got 2 or 3 phases to get a penalty.
They were all
hanging on.
They were that definitely helped. Rogers' kicking not great off the tee.
No.
Off the sand.
The fact that a tee existed for some kicks and the sand for the other.
Yeah, the sand was back then. It was the kick-off at the start of the first and second half was always done off the ground, and restarts after scores were drop kicks. But I think in like early to a couple of years after that, I'd say they just made every kick-off as a drop kick.
The sand was great.
The mound of sand. That was a proper throwback.
So what was he kicking the penalties off? A tee?
Just a tee.
What was the sand for then?
They used to just always have like a little mound of sand in the centre circle.
That's what I couldn't get. Why is it one for one kick?
Tee for the penalties and sand for the restarts.
You could probably get a little bit high. You probably wanted a different height, I suppose, maybe for the kickoff because you want to really. You're just trying to send it right up into the sky and drop 10 yards forward.
But definitely, like, it was very unfortunate with the one that hit the crossbar. But it did remind me that in like the. And Philip Matthews is like, oh, you know, if somebody just been a bit quicker there. Like in the 80s and 90s, one of our best tactics for scoring a try was trying to hit the post from a penalty. it was our best way of getting a bit of territory.
Yeah, exactly. I remember actually after we hit the bar, Philip Matthews was saying if there had just been a couple of runners up quick.
Exactly.
But the kick was from like 50 yards. No one could possibly have got up to the post that quickly.
He was from the era where you remember, like, Jesus, that would constitute a good chance for us.
You got to stay alive.
I had a few as well then. In most jarring, the complete separation of the roles between backs and forwards. Like, the forwards literally just kind of followed the ball for the entire game and just went like ruck to ruck to ruck. You'd have like Keith Wood or some of the odd time would pop out in midfield, taking on a ball or something like that. But for the most part, it was, when it left a ruck, it was going to the backs, and the forwards just ran around after it.
That made for a very nice game.
Yeah,
because the backs matched up against each other.
It played like Joan Alomu rugby did in 1990s when it came out. A few other ones, we did the scrums, the line out as well, just how slow it was. The entire like the lifts and everything, it just took an age, and the one-handed throws, and how simple the attacking systems were.
Very simple.
Like Ireland's lethal weapon was basically like putting it out to Ronan O'Gara, who'd drift a little bit and pop it back inside to Rob Henderson taking a crash ball.
A lot of crash ball.
Yeah.
One thing that jarred for me was the French crowd being dickheads, consistently jeering Ronan O'Gara.
But it wasn't. Sorry, you're not. Are you talking about the kicking, or are you talking about?
That was the way they supported their own team.
That was the thing.
They always do that.
Like, I'm a big fan of it.
I remember being at games over there, and that was just. They obviously don't still do it, but
they do.
Do they?
Oh yeah.
Right.
Like a place like Claremont, they like for their own kickers, they make as much noise as possible.
Right. So
And
that's just the. It's not as if.
Yeah.
Sorry, they probably are trying to put them off, I'm sure, but it's not like. It's better that they all do it. Right?
Yeah.
Rather than one.
Be silent.
It's not like
unexpected person.
For like an Irish kicker, like it's not that like they're trying to put you off. They just do that for kicks.
Yeah.
But the atmosphere is shit.
Yeah.
It was like a terrible.
The other one. The other one I had then, injury time.
Yeah,
the clock not just stopping it. They didn't turn it off for injuries and stuff like that.
I don't know when that happened.
It got to the end, and like the end of the game, even on the commentary, I remember he was saying like, the ball had been kicked out. We didn't know, is this the end or not? Though?
Probably.
And you're just. Anytime the ball gets kicked out, everyone's looking over at the ref to see, was this the moment?
Yeah. I think they kept it a secret as well, the amount of injury time.
Yeah, it wasn't like there would be at least 2 minutes.
It was never even mentioned.
Yeah.
One thing that jumped out for me was and I looked it up on the stats on the website afterwards, I don't know if this is quite right or not, but there was no pounding of the opposition line from either team at any point. It was get inside the 22.
Score, get out.
Ireland got inside the 22 for the first time after about half an hour or something like that, am I right? Something, it was crazy.
Probably their try.
Could have been. But like there was no pounding of the line, and like this uber defence that we see now, like you get up to within 5 metres and you pound
and pick and go and pick and go and pick and go.
Defended a bit, but gave away penalties.
Not up near, not right, not that pounding the line thing. I looked at I don't know if this is right or not. I only watched it. I wish I'd seen it before I started watching the game. But it said that France were in Ireland's 22 for 50 seconds, and Ireland were in France's 22 for 20 seconds
for the whole game,
for the entire game. Like a lot of the other stats I looked at were definitely right. On that, like there's a huge, they've retrospectively gone on and put in like most dominant tackles and all this stuff that is now part of the parlance. But so I don't know.
That's extraordinary. That is the case. I thought surely it'd be higher than that.
My initial thing was that couldn't be right, but actually,
I'd surely think it's higher than that, but not like particularly high.
Yeah,
like 15 seconds. That's like
50 and 20.
That's like 3 or 4 phases. Like
but when you think about Ireland, that was it. They get in. You get into 22, get in, score your try, and get the hell out of there.
Get out of there. Yeah. The last thing that jarred for me, but it brings us nicely onto sliding doors, and what happens after this game is, as we've already mentioned, seeing Warren Gatland and Eddie O'Sullivan sitting side by side in the stand. We'll play a clip from the BBC in just a moment. I think it's good to go. Actually, here's what you actually mentioned, Ger, at the top of the show, which is the conversation about David Humphreys and Ronan O'Gara, and how this then turns into the question of the coaching team.
When the substitution was made of O'Gara or Humphreys for O'Gara, we were sort of musing here in the studio about whether this was, O'Gara might have been a bit cheesed off with 20 minutes to go and he's having a good game and the game's in the balance. But actually, as it turned out, as it did against Scotland, it was a very shrewd move by Warren Gatland, Jonathan.
Yes, and he just steadied the game again. I think he's a better kicker than O'Gara, and things were getting tight. And at the end, he stuck a beautiful penalty over. His kicking out the hand is longer, so they wanted to keep the French in their own half. But it'll be an interesting position now for Warren Gatland. After the England defeat, I went to the press conference, and he was terrible there. They didn't actually speak to Warren, the Irish press. Now, is he going to get another contract? It's amazing how rugby turns around.
Yeah.
Amazing how rugby turns around.
And he went on to get another contract and a successful Ireland career for another 12 years. Beautiful relationship.
Remember all those Grand Slams?
What does happen next? So he gets another contract for 2 more years?
Something. He did. What did he last? 12 months after that?
It was like end of 2001 when he was let go. So he mightn't even have got another contract at that stage. I don't know. Depends obviously when that contract that he was on at that present time was was running out.
That was just Jonathan. It was just something to say. Jonathan Davies, just something to say like that.
Was David Humphreys a better kicker than Ronan O'Gara at that point?
At that point, he probably was.
So, but bear in mind that the previous year he'd missed a sitter to win
had
the game against France.
Horror. And that's when you were talking earlier on about the quality of that kick at the end and like the difficulty of it. He had missed an absolute sitter on 81 minutes in '99 to beat France, and it had a stinker all day long.
I was at that game, and it was like, you're joking me. Basically from the 22. And it just shanks right. Like, what? How did that happen? And here he is. There's no pricking around.
No.
Puts the ball down, wellies it through, and gets out of there. So, like,
Desi Dolan against Meath a couple of years later.
Is this a redemption story then for David Humphries?
Absolutely, yeah.
Is this the overlooked theme of this whole?
I actually think that this was like the stereotypical David Humphries performance, and then it had a little bit of everything, right? It had those crazy drop goal attempts at the end when you're like, just keep,
they were unbelievable.
Just keep the ball. One of them was good and one of them was horrific. It had the amazing penalty, but the back line looked brilliant every time he got the ball. His passing was like, he was really aggressive bringing the ball to the line and offered a completely different player to that Ronan O'Gara. And in fairness, Ronan O'Gara was never that player either. Like, O'Gara becomes one of the great tactical minds of World Rugby over the next 4 or 5 seasons, but at that stage, like, they were the perfect balance to each other, I think, because they were totally different players.
My notes on the end of the game was Humphries goes for the drop goal. What? Question mark, exclamation mark. Another drop goal attempt from Humphries again. What? And then Humphries tries a really risky pass and gives the ball away, and then I just get into block caps here at this point. What is he thinking in these moments?
Well, after he's kicked the penalty to win the game, he throws an intercept that could go the length of the pitch.
Listening to Nigel Starmer-Smith was like listening to my mother during commentary, which when the opposition, when we kick the ball away like that and it goes deep into their territory, she would say something like, well, that's great. That's as good as a score to them now.
Yes.
No, it's not. It's like, it's really not.
It's not on the board.
What would have happened had Ireland actually tried to play possession rugby at that point? Would they?
Are you talking about?
Would have cost a penalty.
They probably would have scored a try. They did get it close to a try at some point near the end, but gave away a penalty, if I'm right, out to the move out to the right hand side.
I recall that.
I think that any time Ireland showed. To be fair, I caveat this with the amount of handling. There was something like 40 handling errors between the two of them that day, which is unheard of now. Like, you could through a whole season now and you wouldn't get that sort of a number. So I caveat with that, but definitely at any point that Ireland got ball in hand, like if you're the coaching ticket looking at that as well, I don't know why you wouldn't at some point have watched it and gone,
we're good at this.
I'm seeing a trend here now. We kick the ball, they're hammering the shit out of us, running back at us, whereas when we have it, we cut right through them. I mean, you know, when you talk about how pivotal a day it was, or when you talk about sort of where Irish rugby went from that, like, it might have been days like that. I kind of feel that the pivotal moment was post, I mentioned a bit earlier on, but post the England game, and when all those changes came in, I thought that was, it's hard to get past that as one of the most pivotal moments in the history of Irish rugby, actually.
So this is less of a sliding doors moment?
I think so. But
is Gatland the coach in '99? So Gatland's the coach in '98. That's when he gets the gig.
It's 97, was it? 97, 98?
Ashton is 97, I think, is he?
Is he?
I think it was 98.
And then, Gatland,
98 to 2001 is Gatland.
Yeah, so you're kind of dead man walking after a World Cup like that, where an underdog as horrible as Argentina beat us. Now it's like, Argentina, they're kind of better than us, especially in World Cups. And probably he needed to go away and learn his trade away from international rugby with Wasps to become the great coach that he became. It's unlikely that you could have done that in the role as Ireland coach. And like, I think Sullivan was a good coach, not a great coach. But that team was that's the start of our best team. And that's the start of our most competitive team. And that's the team that should have won a World Cup quarter-final.
One thing I couldn't believe on it as well is not so much it was like, first win in Paris since 70 whatever. It was the first time Ireland won 3 games in a row in the tournament since 1982.
Yeah.
3 games in a row.
Insane, yeah.
Like,
we should
18 years.
Yeah, we should remember how crap we were.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. I think a lot of people kind of forget how crap Ireland were at rugby for a long time.
Being a ball bouncing back off a post. Yeah. Like we have scored that way in international rugby. I'm like, we should try this a bit more.
So that's why I've gone as my sliding doors moment as the moment when we got a bit of a pep in our step. When we started to look around at each other and say, we're actually okay at this.
I think there's some merit in that. It was the cliche that we were a 60 or 70 minute team. It was a cliche because it was 100% true. And I was interested actually with that in mind looking at that game last night, just looking back at it about how we fared. Like there was a point about 25 minutes to go in the game where we were 9 or 10 or 11 points down or something. And I was actually thinking you could have gone away for a pint at that stage, happily in the notion, or gone off to your aunties.
Gone off to my friend's
happily in the notion. That was done.
Yeah.
And actually that was the moment where maybe we're underselling that.
Well, no, I would say like that. Like, I definitely remember around that time that was like that was being talked about in the schoolyard the following day, and people were mad about rugby all of a sudden just because of that. Now, obviously, it was around the time as well where you had Munster going on their run a couple of months later, getting the Heineken Cup final
on terrestrial TV as well, I think.
Yeah, and all of that was just starting to kick off. So I think it probably was. It was the first big moment in what ended up being a few years of big moments before Ireland kind of became a consistent team and were challenging for things.
I think the key thing is that in Keith Wood you had somebody who understood the professionalism that the England players who were going to win the World Cup in 2003 were all heavily invested in, because he was playing against them all the time, and that was the season he'd actually come back to
Munster.
So he came back to Munster, and in a short period of time he's with Stringer and O'Gara as they're breaking into the team, and with Foley, who's his best mate, then that culture obviously comes from there. But you've got a golden generation of players coming through at the same time. You have Brian O'Driscoll who can do that, and that's, I think, the most important thing here. It's not that like everything else comes from the fact that we suddenly have really good players who are confident at the same time, and there's competition for places. So before, it would have been Humphreys who would have played for a decade and a half and nobody ever would have pushed him, but O'Gara comes along and puts him out of the team, and suddenly he's playing sensational, lights out, like taking risks, trying to get back in the team. I think that there's an ecosystem that builds at the same time with the advent of professionalism. But the key thing is that you have world-class players, which we hadn't. So we had one player ever who would be world-class, and then the next world-class player would come along and that player would fade. Now all of a sudden we have players who are aspiring to be world-class, or we're going to be getting there at the same time.
What would have happened if Warren Gatland became Ireland coach 2 years later, if this was his first season? Because I think you're right in what you're saying, that nobody can survive after the catastrophe that was the 99 World Cup.
Does he bring Sean Edwards with him?
Same. Yeah, well...
The 99 thing is bizarre for me, because like Ireland were crap at the time. He had just been in the job, and over the 2 years since that World Cup had made significant improvements, and they were an unrecognisable team. Like the notion that he was sacked because of what happened in '99, it might have actually been the case, but I just think that is ludicrous.
And it's a judgment as much about Warren Gatland as it is about Ireland, right? Like that point. And I think a huge part of his chippiness as a coach was the fallout of what happened with Ireland. I think that must have been a huge driving factor. Like we've spoken to him about it before, I think it was a huge driving factor.
Yeah, he probably wouldn't have been the same character, I'd
maybe
say.
not, you know.
I don't think he was ready for it either. Yeah. I think that he just, like, he was unbelievably young. The hair is quite black. Like
white.
Yeah.
Do you know one thing we haven't done over the last while is pour enough over Brian O'Driscoll? Like that's the
it was ridiculous.
The purpose of this obviously is to dig deeper beyond. That was the main story, and sort of people take it as a given, but bloody hell, like I definitely felt at one point in terms of that thing that we've spoken about with sort of taking on that French line and trying to keep ball in hand, I thought that other players were looking at him doing it and going,
I can try this.
I could give it a go. Like Henderson was at it, Hickey we mentioned, Dempsey did it a little bit, some of the forwards were at it. Like I definitely felt that there was a bit of a trickle effect from him doing it, and by the way, like probably maybe Hickey might have been as good, but few better at it than him to try and get through that gap. But he was unbelievable. The hits, the tries, the try-saving tackles.
The pick up for the third try.
Yes.
The pick up for the which he does again. He does that again one-handed against Australia a couple of years later.
A scoop.
Yeah, it's like that. The ball skills, as Matt Dawson referred to it, they are off the charts. It's absolutely sensational.
Is this over or underrated? This is our final subject, our final award.
I think it's actually rated just about right.
Okay,
because like it is rated enormously.
I think Brian.
Have you gone back and watched it before this, except for homework for this?
No, you would have seen the tries and stuff. I never watched it in full.
That's the thing. Brian O'Driscoll's hat-trick is perfectly rated, but the game.
I know the game. I wouldn't.
Underrated.
I wouldn't agree with that. I think that people only talk about that game in relation to Brian O'Driscoll's performance. And
that's my point. That's why it's underrated.
But
what I'm saying is more going on here.
No, but there's loads going on, and it was. I would highly recommend to anybody to go back and watch it because it was just a brilliant moment in time, and such a pivotal moment in Irish rugby to go back and watch it. But like the number of mistakes, how shambolic it was, the lack of tactics.
Don't care.
It was largely
a perfect product of its time.
Gorgeous shambles.
Exactly.
So as a game,
totally
I don't think you could. I don't think it's under.
You're going overrated. You're going correct rated. You're going.
Gorgeous is over.
It's a gorgeous shambles.
Yeah, which is
like my favourite thing.
So the criteria for this would be: would you sit down and watch it? And if you knew that every game you were going to sit down and watch was that good, would you watch it?
100%.
I would actually pick watching that game over a lot of like new games that you're like, I don't know what's going to happen here.
It's better than the vast majority of games of the last 15 years.
It's sun-bleached moments of history. The chaos of the scrums is amazing. I think
out of 10 as a game, Neil.
I was surprised. I was surprised at how much I enjoyed this.
Out of 10 as a game.
Give me a rating out of 10.
Question. What, like,
could be an 8 or a 9
for entertainment factor.
As a 8 or 9 is a big difference, is what I'm hearing in my ear. Gonna need an answer, Neil.
I'll give it a 9, sure. I'll give it a 9.
Yeah, I'd give it a 9.
Are we rating the game now?
Yeah. Classic game club, not classic Brian O'Driscoll club.
As a game, it was a beautiful moment in time. Great historically.
Just the game itself. Take away the occasion and everything.
I'd be stretching
it's all part of the game.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. Because if it was just the actual gameplay, I was going 7.
I think with the intrigue, the coaching intrigue that we know is about to come, like Donald Lenihan is there watching what's happening. Was it after this game? Was it after one of these games that Eddie turns to him
the dressing room?
In the dressing room and goes, "Geez, that's him now." Was that?
No, it must have been
England. Or
well,
it was apparently this one, I think.
Couldn't have been the next year because
no.
Well, the next year is foot and mouth year, right? 2001.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And when
did
we
beat
beat
France at home that year as well, isn't it?
So we did beat France after. So maybe it was after that game.
I think it might have been
There was an All Blacks game in there as well.
I think it might have been 2000.
Right, so like think about there's like all this political intrigue happening. It's the birth of a modern superstar, our best ever player, and like who the Brits were like, "Whoa, not sure about his defence." Like, well, screw you, lads. You would kill for a second.
Screw you, Chippy Davis, and Matt Dawson, and the smugness.
And one last comment as well. Kevin Maggs on the wing.
Ah, man,
that was like
the most conservative selection of all time. And, like he didn't do that much.
Yeah, I barely noticed he was playing.
Yeah. Sure, he probably didn't know what he was doing himself, to be fair. It's
unbelievable centre, but not having him really as a winger.
Any last thoughts before we wrap?
Watch the game. It's
definitely
amazing.
Yeah. Just watch it.
This is the Classic Game Club. We'd love to hear your suggestions. If you've
Have you given 10 to any other games?
This is the first time he's rated.
It's the first time we've rated it anything.
Ah, okay. Well, would you have given 10 to any other games?
Oh, Kerry Dublin 2013 comes close.
That'd be up there.
Did you do that?
We did. We've already done that.
Right.
I think that might have been 8 or 9. This, I think, it's just a level of surprise.
We did Ireland Wales. That would have been nowhere near it.
It's the moment.
That was actually a bad game.
Yeah, it was poor.
The moment I can get behind as a 10 out of 10. But if we're just saying as a game,
stop being pedantic.
I couldn't say it.
Let yourself go. That's actually what I'm saying. I think the enjoyment factor is the most important thing here. Like, because you're going to sit down and watch 115 minutes of coverage, including the games. I want to do the Tyrone Kerry games.
Yeah, we'll do that.
The trilogy, just to like pick at the scab.
Not sure if I can do that. They'd all be like a 2 or 3 out of 10. All terrible games. Not good for this particular slot, I think.
Are there other rugby games that's good? Because so the 2009 game, I've got no. I don't feel like.
To be honest, what I would be more curious to do now is actually go back and watch a few more games from around that
era.
time,
yeah,
to just kind of see. To get an even better idea of what they were like. Because really all I remember from those games are individual tries and moments.
02 to 03, we are absolutely sensational before the World Cup happens. We're playing some of the best rugby that we've ever played.
Well, to be honest, even at the World Cup.
We got absolutely hockeyed by France.
Got hockeyed by France, but I always look back and go, like, that was an unbelievable French team.
Was it the 07 World Cup?
07 we were...
Sensational.
Like, sensational.
And Hickey's at his best.
Yeah.
And
flopped in.
Should you watch some of those games?
Yeah, we'll do that next. Any suggestions as well at home? Tweet us at Off the Ball. We'll get around to all of them.
Watch the 2007 World Cup, please.
Thanks a million.
AM. This is OTB Sports Radio. OTB Gold. The very best.